Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто воде всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 269 of the news. And man, does that anthem get better every single time that I listen to it.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine here on day 269, and we have some pretty interesting news. Of course, some people today have been talking about the Kinzel missile, I believe it's pronounced, that did land somewhere near Kyiv. We may cover that on tonight's stream. I was most likely not going to cover it, but I have seen some people asking, so we'll try and get some information on that later. But one thing that I find to be truly a game changer is that winter has arrived. The first instance of snowfall has now fallen on the fields of Ukraine, meaning that as far as this war is concerned, winter has already begun. The Rasputitsa and the muddy roads of Ukraine are now going to start turning into solid sheets of ice. Solid to the core, and allowing armored vehicles to move at pretty relatively decent speeds. Although, you know, always watch out for the road incident here and there. But moving on from that, there's another important point to cover with the freezing of the ground. The Russian supply lines are going to be suffering drastically. We're going to be covering all of this a little bit later on tonight, but real quick, I actually want to show y'all that winter has also arrived in Russia as well. As we can see here, these guys, who have now just found out that they were deceived and lied to, are about to be sent to the front lines. And we can even see in this video that the weather is looking pretty frigid. And so with that, here's the video. You can see them all standing around in the cold. You see that it's so cold that their breath is almost creating this low-level fog. Also, what the hell is that? Is that a Soviet flag?
It looks like it, or a Chinese one.
Man, they're living on the set of Chernobyl. We can now see the drunk Russian explaining to us that he's been lied to. Not that new of a story. He's saying, we have no toilets. Our country is hellhole. We live in a base in the middle of an airfield tarmac with a Soviet flag flying overhead like it's 1985. I don't know what we're doing.
Мы автоматы еще даже не видели.
We now see him turn around because his dialogue option is now ended, so, you know, there's nothing more for him to do. He just turns around and starts disappearing in the crowd. But he's now decided to come back and throw in another 2 bits.
Сказали, гранат нету, нахуй. Не дали даже автобус назад. Мы пешком с полигона, блядь, пришли сюда. 10 километров. Назад, 10 километров, блядь. Оттуда пришли сюда, блядь.
What the hell is this shady figure doing? Why in the world did it look like he rounded the corner like he was a pickpocket?
Yeah, seriously. That guy is a menace.
I mean, this guy reminds me, have you ever seen, let's see, what was it? Frankenstein's Bride or something similar like that? It had that guy who was Willy Wonka in the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory in it.
I think so.
Let me try and pull up a picture of that real quick. Let's see. Frankenstein's Bride. Because I'm telling y'all, if y'all know what I'm talking about, this guy looks a lot like it. So let me see if we can find the cast here. Oh, dagnammit. Let me just go to the images. Let me see if I can find y'all a picture of this real quick. I don't think this was the movie, actually. What was it called? Let's see if anyone's saying it in the live chat. Let's see.
Igor?
Igor? I think it was Igor. Gene Wilder. Okay, Gene Wilder. Frankenstein. I'm sure that'll pull up the movie. Yeah, Gene Wilder, Frankenstein. Let me pull up some images.
Young Frankenstein.
Hang on. I know what he looks like. I'm trying to find it here. I'm sorry, everyone. The delivery's taking a second. This guy right here. You see him? Right there?
Oh.
That's what that guy reminds me of right here. Let's watch that one more time. Keep that in mind. Young Frankenstein. It's not Frankenstein's Bride. It's Young Frankenstein. And think of the little hunchback guy when he comes around this corner. So let's watch that again. Yes, sire.
Они продадут там же, нахуй, нас на Украине, ёбаные хуесосы, блядь.
Now you can see the little hunchback man wandering off. And also,
NPC behavior.
yes, very NPC-like behavior. And also notice that at the very end of the clip, we could see, like I said at the beginning, that winter has arrived. You can see the occasional slight flurry of snow coming down from the sky, showing that not only will the Russians be having a difficult time in Ukraine, they're probably going to be having a much more difficult time in Russia as well, like they have been over the whole war, and now it's going to get even worse. And here's another thing to think about. The Russians have no proper barracks. We can see right here that all of these guys have pretty much been put onto a tarmac at an airfield with some tents, and the best they have for warmth is a little wood-fired stove inside of these tents. That's what these guys are going to be living in and freezing in, and most likely it's freezing to death in as the winter starts to set in. And today is the day where it begins. The freezing will start now. The Rasputits is over as far as I'm concerned. In about a week, the ground will be so cold and the snow will help to solidify it enough that some roads will still be a muddy, snowy slush, but some of them will start to freeze over enough that the entire, I guess you could say, terrain of the fields in Ukraine will change in terms of how units can move across them. And so with that, that's the end of the video, but a great way to start off today's news. And now it's time for us to move out of Russia and on down into Ukraine, and specifically into our location unknowns first, because we've had some really interesting clips today, starting off with the Russians getting sent to somewhere. Now, I would like, wait a minute, hang on, what? It's now marked, hang
Got
on.
a little blurry thing on it.
Let me take that off screen real quick, and because earlier it wasn't marked like this. And let me just make sure. Okay. Apparently, I've been desensitized to this stuff so much that it didn't really register in my head that may be a little bit questionable. The last few seconds of it aren't questionable, but the first 10 seconds of it aren't. So I'm going to let y'all keep that in mind, and we're going to take a quick look at it. So, this is a Russian team that is trying to recover wounded from the battlefield, and the Ukrainians have decided that that is a decent amount of manpower that needs to be taken out, as you can see right there. Now, I can't show y'all beyond this part of the clip. The rest of it is a little bit questionable, but it looks like the Ukrainians are making sure to make concerted efforts to whittle down Russian manpower wherever available. Well, now we're now going to be moving on to the next clip of Location Unknown News, where we can see a Ukrainian 57mm anti-aircraft gun at work. Some people have been talking about maybe these things could be used as an anti-aircraft gun around the cities of Ukraine, the major ones like Kyiv, to help shoot down suicide drones like Shaheds, and that might be a pretty good idea. Apparently these things can target aircraft at 6 kilometers away, although I feel like that is an incredibly far stretch. It probably needs a lot of additional technology that would be hard to find and also expensive to field this anti-aircraft piece like that. But also, from what I've heard, and I'm not sure if this is true or not, this anti-aircraft gun actually has fused proximity shells, which explode when they get near a target and don't have to directly hit it. And so if that is the case, these things could be used quite well around Ukrainian cities to stop some of these kamikaze drones from flying in. But with that, here's the video. We hear some fire in the distance as this AA crew sits on the piece.
Нет.
You see them just hanging out. The firefight is happening in front of them, but as far as they're concerned, they're just on a picnic. We can now see them turning the AA gun. This thing is archaic. Just in case you don't know, these 57mm guns are from the 1950s. We've seen the Russians bringing in loads of these, which is hilarious. Allow me to take a second to explain this. Well, you see, the Ukrainians use them, it seems sensible, because they're a poor country, they weren't expected to be the best and most advanced military in the world, and so seeing them using something from the 50s seems to be pretty much in place. It doesn't seem to be out of place. However, with the Russians claiming that they are a first-rate military that can go toe-to-toe with the United States before the war, seeing them use these is hilarious. But here we can see the Ukrainians turning the gun, and now we can hear them firing it. We can also see them firing it.
Sounds good.
It sounds pretty neat. Imagine having this thing as a home defense gun.
I wouldn't mind having it.
I wouldn't mind having it either. Man.
Wow.
While this thing may be dated, I've got to say one thing. The older anti-aircraft guns just sound beefy. Even the 40mm Bofors guns that were used a lot in the Second World War sound similar to this one. And I just love those kinds of guns. The 40mm Bofors especially.
Is the yellow coming out of the front, is that from the powder, or is that from, like, rust in the barrel or something?
That is actually from the powder, and that is a great question. If you take a look at the USS Iowa firing back when it used to be in service in the Navy, and I'll try and show you this. Maybe I can get you a picture of it after the guns have fired and the smoke is dissipating. Yeah, right here. You can actually see that the smoke coming out of the guns has this yellowish color. Which is really interesting and cool in its own way, because I don't really know how to explain it. I think the yellowish color comes from the sulfur in the powder. I may be incorrect in that statement, but I believe that's where the yellow color comes from. It's a really cool little event. And also, it's really cool to watch large guns fire, like the 16-inch guns on the Iowa, because while we say that modern powder is smokeless, and most of it, even for larger caliber guns, is supposed to be smokeless, it certainly isn't, especially when you look at larger caliber guns like that. Anyways, we're now going to be moving on from this little video of this 57mm gun in action, which is pretty cool to see, and hopefully it was pounding Russian units in front of the gun that we couldn't see. But with that, we're moving on to the next clip, where we can see a Russian surrendering, and it appears that this time the guy was smart enough to not pull off a feint. If you weren't here for yesterday's stream, just to explain what I'm talking about here and what a feint is, a decent amount of Russians were surrendering the other day, and one of the last guys to surrender decided that it wasn't good enough for him to just end the war and go home, so he came out with an AK and sprayed his gun at some Ukrainian soldiers. That is a feint, because all of the soldiers beforehand were setting up the image to the Ukrainians and getting their guard down that they were actually surrendering, and a feint means that they're not really surrendering, it's a fake. And so that's what we saw. This guy was smart enough today that he didn't pull a feint, and he actually surrendered to Ukrainian forces, and this entire thing was filmed on drone. We can now see him walking down the mossy path. Not exactly a yellow brick road, but for this guy, I think it is leading him to the land of Oz. You see him creeping forward a little bit. We can see some Ukrainian soldiers here on the side that are about to receive him as he continues to walk forward. And with that, the video ends. But it is good to know that the Russians, some of them, are having enough sense to surrender before it gets a little bit too cold, because these guys have no winter gear at all. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next clip of Location Unknown News, where we can see some Ukrainian helicopters in action. Also, Tim L said the Iowa uses black powder. I'm going to have to look into that, because I was always told that it was some type of cordite, which, as far as I knew, was not black powder, but I will look into that. And so, here's the video of this Ukrainian Mi-17 taking flight. Pretty cool once again. Also, let me try and get this in higher graphics. Actually, I can't. So we're going to be watching this with a lack of pixels, but we can see some Ukrainian helicopters in formation. We can now see them flying over some pretty busy roads. Flying in formation again, firing off their unguided rockets. Flying over the fields again in a pretty large formation and incredibly low to the ground. We can now see them firing off unguided rockets again. We can now see them firing off unguided rockets 4 times in a row. Different angles each time. We can also see the vortices being created in the flares.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think that's got to be one of the neatest things about flares being dispensed, as the little trails they leave behind and how they're spun in circles by the vortices of the rotors. Oh, whoa, wait a minute. Did that guy just scrape the helicopter against the ground? I think he did. When did he?
Maybe.
Hang on, let's watch that again. No,
Who's
he didn't.
filming this, by the way?
I think it was just a
There's
soldier.
some random person on the ground?
I think it was a soldier on the ground. He didn't scrape the landing gear against the ground. I was like, there's no way, because the rotor would have hit the ground before the wheels hit the ground, but that's actually a bit of an illusion. That looks like dust being kicked up, but it's the edge of a field. So, I'm sorry, everyone, I got that wrong, but that was impressive to see. And with that, That's the end of the video, but once again, a very good look at the brave Ukrainian helicopter pilots who continue to take to the skies in these older Mi-17s, but they still pack as much a punch as a modern Russian Ka-52 or an Mi-28, and the Russians pretty much use these incredibly expensive and incredibly overcomplicated helicopters to do the exact same jobs that the Ukrainians are using these Mi-17s for. And so once again, huge load of credit to the Ukrainian pilots, and now it's time for us to move on into the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a little bit of a terrible collision. Now this was pretty interesting to see. What we're about to watch here is a Ukrainian unit standing by their BTR-4, and a Ukrainian MTLB is coming down the other side of the road, heading the opposite direction from right to left on the screen, and it somehow runs into a Ukrainian staff car or some kind of just a utilitarian car and rams it into the BTR-4. And so here's the video. We see them standing by the BTR-4. You hear the MTLB run into the car and then slam it into the front of the BTR-4.
Poor car.
Poor car, indeed. And we don't know if any Ukrainians were inside of the car, but that was quite an accident right there. Of course, accidents are always bound to happen. The U.S. military has a pretty decent amount of accidents. You just don't hear about them. But it's pretty unfortunate to see that a car has been totaled in the process. And also, am I seeing this, or does that MTLB have white walls? Yeah, it's got white walls.
Oh, white walls.
Yeah, look at that. Like
that's something.
That's like parade colors right there. Let me go. Wait a minute, hang on. Ukrainian military parade. Maybe this thing is painted up in parade camo. It's very common for Eastern European countries to paint the rims of their wheels white. The Russians do that at all of their Victory Day parades. But did the Ukrainians do it? That would be interesting to know. Here on these BTR-4s, we can't see that. So I don't know why the rims of that MTLB were painted white. Seems like something small for me to be focusing on, considering it just totaled a car. But maybe this guy needs to go back to driving school for a little bit and make sure that he knows how to drive the MTLB, because that's quite an accident right there.
Well, it could have been worse. Tony could have been driving.
I mean, that's true. If Tony was driving, he would have rammed that car into the BTR-4. The car would have exploded. Everyone on the side of the road would have died. Everyone inside of the MTLB would be on fire. And then there would be some Russian going, "Blah!" in the middle of it all. But anyways, with that, it's now time for us to move on into the next bit of Location Unknown news. And as you can see here on the caption, this is going to be some RoboCop level of stuff. If y'all have ever seen the RoboCop movie, one of the few modern movies, if you want to call it modern, it's about 40 years old now, that I've watched was RoboCop. And the way that the guys in the movie were going to kill the RoboCop man was giving them this Beretta 50 caliber gun. These are really cool. They're incredibly neat, and also it looks mammoth-sized on top of this Humvee. I mean, like, that is an impressive gun. It's a really cool.
It really is impressive. I like it.
Yeah, and is that a Land Rover?
Yeah, it looks like it, like one of those Australian versions.
Yeah, that's freaking cool. I actually didn't see that the first time I looked through the pictures, but they got two Humvees, and then they have a Land Rover Defender, I believe. And also
I would much rather have the Defender any day over the Humvee, I gotta say.
Now this is one thing I gotta give the British credit for. The Land Rover Defenders are incredible looking. I don't know about y'all, but I still think that the design of a Land Rover Defender, not that one. Let's see, it was a 1990 Land Rover Defender, wasn't it? No, that's not the one we're talking about.
So you're asking which model that was in the picture?
Let's see, British Army Land Rover. Let me pull this up real quick. It's a Land Rover Wolf, I believe, if I'm correct. Let's see, is it? Yeah, it's this one. It's a Land Rover Wolf. And these things, now that I've got the right name in mind, I'm not sitting here calling it a Defender. It's not a Defender, it's a Wolf. These things are cool, and I really love how the British Army had these things, and we're using them kind of like the U.S. would use Jeeps all the way up until the 80s. This is pretty much the British Army's equivalent of a Jeep, in a way. And I really love the look of them. I really like the look of all the Land Rovers and Range Rovers from the 90s and the 80s. I think they're just like the coolest looking, I guess you could say, rugged things on Earth. But that's just my opinion. What do you think about them, Matthew?
I mean, it looks pretty cool to me. I like the Range Rover or Land Rover.
I mean, like,
That's right. The Range Rover is the car, like the civilian edition, I think.
Yeah, I think so. The whole Land Rover, Range Rover thing is really confusing to me. I don't know why, but maybe one day I'll get the hang of it. Anyways, it's pretty cool to see that they have a Beretta 50 cal. And speaking of which, it is in the works. If you were watching during the question segment last night, a lot of y'all sat there and told me to go get the Thompson. The Tommy gun is on the way, and I will be making a video on it in the future. I don't know when, but it is on the way, and so I can guarantee that that part will be in the making. I've got to try and figure out everything else, but that'll be one of the first on-screen videos we've done beyond the face reveal, so that'll be pretty cool. And maybe in the future, if everyone likes those kinds of videos, maybe we can get our hands on one of those, Matthew, because that would be really cool to review.
Yeah, that would be cool. That'd be legendary, actually.
Legend. But anyways, with that, that's the end of that little location unknown bit. Thought it was really cool to see that the U.S. is providing some of our beefiest, I guess you could say, rifles to Ukraine. And with that, we're moving on to our last clip of location unknown news, where we can also see the Russians retreating. This is in an undisclosed location, and we didn't really get a time frame for it, but we could see that they were hauling it. We see a Russian right here waving his hand at the passing convoy. Where you now see the Russians watching in disbelief. Also, why is this guy wearing the helmet like a bonnet? You know, he looks like the blue bonnet girl on the butter logo. Let me pull it up. Blue bonnet butter logo. This right here, he looks he looks like this. Oh my god, that's stupid. I don't know why they wear helmets like that in the Russian army, but yet they continue to do that. And when you see the convoy passing by so fast that they're kicking up dust like a cloud. And with that, that's the end of the video. But once again, a really funny look at the Russians taking another run for it. And not only that, but we did see today, and we'll be showing this later on the news, so make sure to stick around for that, that the Russians once again were committing friendly fire in their retreat from Kherson to a pretty high degree, and also on some pretty expensive tech. But with that, that's the end of our location unknowns. And before we move out of the location unknowns and on to the front lines themselves and start talking about the situation we're starting to see there, let's move to Chernihiv, because once again, the Russians and their missile attacks have not died down yet. And today we can still see the after effects, well, actually the effects of these missile attacks on cities like Chernihiv. And so without further ado, here's a video of a Russian cruise missile slamming into the middle of Chernihiv and hitting a kindergarten. And so, here's the video. I've got to mute it real quick because it has copyrighted music. But we see the car backing up. It's now about to head on its way. It's now moving on along down the road. And here in a second, we're about to see a Russian cruise missile slam down. And right there, the cruise missile slammed down right into the middle of the road, hitting a kindergarten. We don't know how many people, well, how many kids and teachers were inside of that kindergarten, but it is pretty unfortunate to hear that it was hit directly by a Russian cruise missile. My question is, how in the world can the Russians justify hitting a target anywhere in that area? From what we could tell, in that area of Chernihiv, there was no strategic targets there, no electrical substation nearby, nothing. And yet the missile lands right there on top of the kindergarten. And so with that, that's the end of that video. Once again, another unfortunate one to see, and once again showing that the Russians and the level of barbarism that they can go to is just unbelievable. And to think that there is a Russian commander out there that launched that missile, and that the Russians will justify the launch of that missile, and that guy is probably glad that he killed Ukrainian kids. And, you know, that sounds like a massive exaggeration, but we see that they're trying to commit genocide against the Ukrainians on a day-to-day basis. They make it clear on their propaganda channels that that's the case. They make it clear that on the personal level in Russia that the Ukrainians are subhuman in their opinion. They should be wiped off the face of the earth. And so this kind of stuff, who knows? I know that they were probably trying to hit some kind of substation. Maybe they were stupid or the technology was so faulty that it landed on the kindergarten. But to think that they maybe killed multiple kindergarten-level kids just for no reason seems to be absurd. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that a little bit of location, well, Chernihiv news, not location unknown, but Chernihiv news, and we're now going to be moving down to Novorossiysk for a minute before we get to the front lines again, because I forgot, this is the other bit of location, well, not location, why do I keep on saying location? Screw the location stuff. This is part of the Russian news. I forgot to cover it a little bit earlier when we were in the Russian segment, but just in case y'all are wondering why the Ukrainians have been so quiet on drone attacks in the past couple of weeks against Sevastopol or Novorossiysk, they weren't. In fact, today we saw that a drone attack was committed on the Russian forces that are stationed at Novorossiysk. So let's watch this little video of these drones taking probably one of the longest flights in the war and also helping to take out more Russian military infrastructure. And so let's watch the clip. You see the camera looking out into the night sky, and here in a second we're about to see a couple of explosions. There's the first one. You see a little fireball over there, and we can also see another explosion right there in the port. And that right there were two separate kamikaze drones that flew somehow, I don't even know how, all the way to Novorossiysk and knocked out Russian military and naval infrastructure in that port. And I've got to be honest with y'all, I don't even know where that would have launched. Let's just say it launched from Zaporizhia. That was a flight of 250 miles all the way from its origin to its target. And that is unbelievable to think. And also, it's the craziest thing to think that most of its flight would have been over Russian-controlled land or Russian-controlled seas. You would have thought that the Russians would have picked these things up somewhere. But of course, the Russians, in their all-knowing and benevolent incompetence, did not see the drones flying 250 miles over nothing but Russian-controlled land, and they were able to reach their target. We don't know how much damage was actually caused in this attack, but one thing's for certain, the Russians are not going to be too happy about that. And also, real quick, let me make sure. Also, before we move on to the front lines, let me address something real quick I've seen a lot of questions about. Some people have been asking, hey, what happened to last night's stream? Some other people have been saying, oh, the quality of the channel's dropping. You didn't have a stream last night. We did, and we actually showed this little clip on the news. This, and we're not showing it again. I'll explain why. This was a clip of the comedian Dave Chappelle making a couple of jokes about Ukraine on Saturday Night Live. Just in case y'all do not know, Saturday Night Live is apparently more protective about their clips than Disney is on theirs, and they actually had our stream taken down last night and completely blocked from viewing. I heard that from a couple of people today, and I didn't believe it because I checked my emails, and I didn't even get an email telling me that that had happened. And then I got on my channel, I looked at my dashboard, it didn't give me a notification there, and then I go to the video section and take a look there, and it tells me then that it's blocked. It didn't even tell me that it was blocked for me to let y'all know. So that was incredibly bizarre to me. Also, it's incredibly insane to think that SNL is so protective over their clips, considering that I don't know anyone who even watches SNL anymore. I was thinking maybe we'll help them out a little, considering that their ratings have been in the tubes for like a decade. But you know, apparently they've got to try and keep people watching somewhere, and it's not going to be here. And so with that, we're now finally going to be moving on from the Russian news. Once again, great to see that the Russian Navy was hit in Novorossiysk. Once again, we don't know the level of damage, but if we get any kind of information on that, we will try and check it out. And so with that, it's now time for us to move on to Kupiansk, and we've seen this very sweet clip. It's a great way to bring us into the actual frontline news today. And we will also be making a little bit of a change on how we report the frontline news. But real quick, we're going to be watching this little video of this dog that the Terra unit found in Kupiansk and has now become the unit's mascot and one of their beloved pets. And while we're about to get to this clip, a whole bunch of y'all have voted unanimously on a poll about the Russians. 800, well, really 900 of y'all now have voted on it. And I want to see what all of y'all are thinking on that poll. So what do we got on that, Matthew?
And on the most recent poll?
Yeah, on the most recent one.
So on the most recent poll, the question is, do you think the Russians intentionally target children? It looks like 87% said yes, they are terrorists. 8% said I'm not sure, and 4% said no, it could have been an accident.
I would say that the Russians are certainly terrorists. Especially when a cruise missile lands in the kindergarten, you can't really say that they're not terrorists anymore. You know, and on top of that, we've already been hearing about the tortures in Kherson, and we'll be covering that again on the news today, because we've gotten more information about it from Radio Free Europe. But there's absolutely no way that you could sit there and say that they're not terrorists. And so I would have to agree with the 87% of y'all who said that. And Matthew, do you have anything to add to it?
So I have nothing to add to that one. I would say yes would be my answer. I think they do intentionally target children, sadly, and very sickly they do that because that is just how evil they are. But that's all I have to add to it.
All right, so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next one, the question is, do you think Putin is going to escalate the nuke talk again very soon? It looks like 69% said yes, he's going to resume bluffing, 14% said I'm not sure, and 16% said no, he will let the nuke talk go.
And I think, can you reread that one again real quick, Matthew?
Yes, give me just a second, I'm getting really behind here, just a second. All right, so that one said, do you think Putin is going to escalate the nuke talk again very soon? 69% said yes, he's going to resume bluffing. 14% said I'm not sure, and 16% said no, he will let it go.
In my opinion, I will say that he's going to start up the nuke talk soon. If y'all have ever noticed, and I'm sure, and I've said this a million times, and I know that a lot of y'all have heard this, so I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it's true. The talk of nukes from Russia, and also the idea of Belarus invading, comes around almost on a monthly cycle. It's almost like that magazine that you get in the mail that you don't really want anymore, but it does come around every single month, and you know when that's going to be like clockwork. You know, I usually used to get magazines from this company called the Littleton Coin Company, and while I used to be into coins when I was like in the 8th grade, they would still send them all the way when I was a senior in high school. And that was just really annoying, and you wouldn't even understand why they sent them anymore. But still, it's kind of like that. They will start up the nuke talk again, and I believe that they've really started it off on a bang this time. We will be getting to that in the next segment of news about the Kinzhal missile, if I'm correct, that's the name of it, that landed near Kyiv, that had its nuclear warhead removed, but the entire purpose of the Kinzhal hypersonic missile existing is for nuclear warheads to be equipped onto them, and then they be launched, and they I guess you could say, travel so quickly that response times from the West would practically be non-existent before it even hits its target. And so with that, I would certainly have to agree that the nuke talks are coming up again. And do you have anything to add to that, Matthew?
No, I don't. And also, Enforcer, I'll add to the poll at the very beginning because after I read it, I have to move on to other issues. So, with that being said, we are moving on to the third poll, which says, would you rather drive the Humvee or militarized Land Rover? It looks like 46% said Land Rover, 41% said Humvee, and 13% said I'm not sure. So, surprisingly pretty close here, but I see a lot of you are with me. You'd rather take the Land Rover. And I saw somebody in the live chat earlier saying, can the Land Rover climb up a 4-foot vertical incline like a Humvee can? And honestly, I'm not really sure, but I have seen a Humvee do it. But the Land Rover seems capable, but I would be shocked if it could. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the Land Rover is certainly the funner one to drive. I mean, like, there's no well, I don't know. I haven't driven either of them. But I got to say, the Land Rover Wolf, and let's just look at it again. The Land Rover Wolf right here. Really cool looking. Really neat. It just looks like it would be fun to drive. I've only seen one of these in person, though, in America. Here's a better picture of it. Versus a Humvee. Kind of a little stinky. I'm just kidding. The Humvee is pretty cool looking. It looks mean. And you got to give it a load of credit for that. It does look pretty cool. But the Land Rover Wolf just looks that much funner. I don't know. I mean, like, maybe it's just me. It is a pretty contentious poll. So it might just be me and Matthew who think that. But it just looks cool. You know, and there's really nothing else to add to it. And if we look through these pictures, like this one, like the wheelbase on this one and how short it is, it almost looks like a Jeep. I really like the longer versions of them, however, like this one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that short version doesn't look right.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't look right at all. Oh, I love this one. Now, that's actually a model from Hobby Boss, and I believe that's a model of a Land Rover Defender. Land Rover Defender Wolf. So it was kind of right. Apparently, it is a Defender, but I don't know. Anyways, I guess this is a model of what it would have looked like during Desert Storm or the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And that's gotta be the coolest version I've seen yet. Although it's a model, that's incredibly cool.
It is pretty cool.
And what about the Well, that's the way the Humvee would have looked in Iraq and Afghanistan. And even during the earlier parts of the war, it would have looked even a little less stripped down, less beefy, because they didn't have, I guess you could say, all of the protection that they had on it. But still, the Humvee's neat. Don't get me wrong, the Humvee's cool. The Land Rover Wolf, especially this one, although it's a model, looks incredibly cool. I would love to have one of these. Anyways, with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next poll, and I hope we addressed that one fairly well.
Right, so that was our last poll. So now moving on to our super chat questions. Up first, we have a $55 donation from Duncan VR, who is a channel legend, by the way. And Duncan, thank you very much for that very generous support. And of course, if you already know by now, which you should, Duncan loves animal noises. So here we go. He says, "Ba ruff ba." Now Matthew likes to say "ba ba ba" all on his own. Ba moo, ba ba meow. And force her to do a Austin Powers, "Yeah, baby." Moo moo woof moo. Ba Putin can go in exile to Iran, and oink oink. Putin is very suka. Ba ba meow. Yeehaw.
And also, it's for some reason, I've seen this in the live chat, a lot of y'all are moving on this crusade to have me do Austin Powers impressions, and I haven't heard Austin Powers a lot. Believe it or not, Matthew, let me show you this guy. Well, actually, let me pull this up on another tab, and then bring it over to the main screen where you and everyone else can see it. But this guy here, if I'm correct, this guy is the voice of Shrek.
That guy?
Yeah, that guy. Like, is that weird to me or what? Like, you wouldn't expect this guy to be the voice of Shrek, yet he is. That's just
And what
weird.
does God do again? Rather than Shrek?
He did Austin Powers and probably a couple of other things. Let me check. So let's see here. Let me find him. Yeah, Mike Myers was the guy, and he did. Okay, so you may remember this one, Mandy, that terrible Cat in the Hat movie that they had us watch in school. You know, the live action one. Yeah, he did that. He did Wayne's World. I've never watched Wayne's World, and he did all the Shreks. I can't really see anything else he's done rather than Austin Powers and Shrek is like an entire series, but that's kind of what he's known for. Anyways, we will do an Austin Powers. Yeah, baby! And that's the best I can do. It's not good. And also some people say he was on SNL, and I don't even know. I don't really watch SNL. And
Everybody's saying Wayne's World?
And we
like
did,
folks just know that we are like super like out of touch when it comes to like the pop culture stuff. So I've never heard of Wayne's World, and I'm sure I'm about to get roasted for that. But maybe the enforcer can show me a picture of it. Maybe I'll recognize it.
No, you wouldn't recognize it. I saw it. I've heard of it before, but we've never watched it. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And thank you so much once again, Duncan VR, for supporting this channel and also torturing Matthew once again with the animal sounds. He loves it a whole load. And of course, without your support, we wouldn't be able to be here and keep doing the animal noises. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
Right. And just a heads up, folks, when we do the impressions and things like in the super chats, those are messages sent in by viewers. So I see some folks saying that we should stop the impressions. We have to read off the super chats the way they come in. So really no apologies for that. We have to read them off. So up next, we have a $20 super chat from SuperBonker9000, who is a NAFO member. He says, "Chat question, please. You guys as well as LSA have a great Thanksgiving. I'm going to be MIA for some time. And also, happy Thanksgiving to you as well."
And happy Thanksgiving to you as well, SuperBonker9000. And thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping us to keep running. And also, we haven't gotten around, I guess, to the point, although you brought it up, so I guess I'll bring it up now, close to Thanksgiving, but we will also be taking Thanksgiving off. The day of Thanksgiving, we will not be airing. So we'll be saying that as much as we can up until that day. We may even, I don't know, I don't want to try and like cut off as many streams as possible, but I would like to take a break. It's been 270 days of nonstop coverage, and Thanksgiving seems to be a great time to get close to a break. So we will be taking Thanksgiving off. I don't know if we'll be taking any additional days off right around Thanksgiving, like one extra day, but I'll let y'all know that once we get really close to time. But with that, I thank you so much once again, Super Bonker. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. I hope you enjoy loads of turkey out there, and also make sure to say hi and also send a postcard to the Lee Spring Army, as we will be here, and we will still be covering the news, not on Thanksgiving though, but on the week of, and probably on, well, I don't know. Black Friday might be the other day we take off, since it's right after Thanksgiving, and a lot of people will probably still be off then. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. Have a great Thanksgiving. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this is going to be the last one of the first segment, and this one goes to Packrat, who puts in a $10 donation and says, "Hello again, Packrat family here, sticking to the tradition. Give my question to the chat in Slava Ukraine."
And
also, Mr. Packrat, please send my regards to Mrs. Packrat and also all of the children Packrats.
And thank you so much for the support, Sir Packrat. And I hope that you enjoy packing those rats like y'all have been. And I hope that the entire Packrat family keeps up with that great tradition. Also, thank you so much once again for supporting the channel. And we will make sure to get to a live chat. And so with that, what's the live chat, Matthew?
All right, and the live chat goes to Julie Knorr, who says, "Haven't you heard about the nuclear warhead dummy that Russia sent to Kyiv?"
We did, and we might try and cover that later on tonight on stream. But to be honest, so many people had already covered that today on YouTube. I was like, we will cover something that is very important, but also has not been covered much, which is that when that snow has finally fallen in Ukraine, and with it, the supply line situation on the front lines is going to be collapsing. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for a good question. We will be covering that probably a little later in stream. Can't really talk about it right now because I didn't really look into it much, considering that so many people had covered it before. But with that, I hope we answered that question fairly well. And thank you so much, Mr. Rat Packs, Mr. Pack Rat, Mr. Packing of the Rats, the Rats of the Pack, for supporting this channel and helping us to keep on running. And so
the entire Packrat family is sitting in front of the TV watching us right now, according to Mr. Packrat.
You know, Matthew, from now on, whenever you read off any support that comes in from them or any live chats, say Mr. Packrat.
Yes.
And so with that, it's now time for us to move on from the question segment and move on into the next segment of news, starting off at Kupiansk with a cute little video of a dog that was found while the terror unit was helping to liberate Kupiansk. And you can already see it right there, and it's a really cute one. And I bet, and this is honestly setting you up for a great little story. And so with that, here's the video. We see the dog hopping out of the window, and this is the story of the little dog. Lalalia was rescued by the Kraken unit while they were liberating Kupiansk. She helped guys to free the city from the occupiers, you know, just wandering around looking cute and all. Look at that thing go. And we can see it riding in the back of a truck, hopping through windows. It seems to be its favorite activity to hop through the windows and also walking by destroyed Russian MTLBs. We now see it resting under one and eating. Oh, look at that thing.
Dang, that dog is eating.
That thing is harking. We now see it resting and looking out another window. The poor dog also has anxiety. Oh, poor dog. I'm a huge dog person. I love dogs a whole load. And I hate to see dogs get put in terrible situations, but it is good to know that people are taking care of them. And we can see that the terror unit helped to make sure that this dog is okay. And now see her getting some more hugs and petting. And now we can see them leaving her behind. But look at that dog. How can you not like that dog? It's a cute one. Also, I like the red, white, and blue collar. Very American.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
We now see her being adopted by a new family and giving a handshake. A very polite dog. It could
really.
It could
shaking hands and everything.
Yeah, it could do contract and patenting work with that kind of handshake. Quick, put it in the legal division. We now see them petting the dog, and the dog's just eating it up. Honestly, reminds me of Mr. Corgi.
Yeah, a little bit.
You know,
What is that dog eating? It's eating like fresh, like chicken or
it's like
something.
eating like rice and chicken. Chicken and rice?
That dog's eating good.
Now see it running through a little pond. It's got to be cold. Oh my god, it's got to be so cold for that dog at this time of year. But you see it's got a German Shepherd friend. And with that, that's the end of the video. But once again, a really cute one of a cute little dog from Kupiansk. And so with that, now on this high note, it's time for us to finally move on to the front lines itself and get down into the nitty-gritty business of what's going on around here and what we're going to be seeing as changes going forward. We are going to be making a bit of a small change to this channel going forward and how we cover news from the front lines. Due to the Ukrainians taking the complete control over the entirety of the front line from the north to the south, we have largely had to cut out any kind of analysis of the front lines. And we've almost turned the news into reacting to videos, and we've wanted to try and cover in a little bit more detail what's going on the front lines and what's going to be happening in the future. We're going to ensure that we do not violate operational security by explaining what exactly Ukrainian units are doing, but we do want to add an extra level of detail because, to be honest, it does seem like it is kind of lacking a little bit. And so today is going to be a little bit different. We're going to not explain much of what the Ukrainians are doing, but we will be explaining what we at least know the Russians are doing in this area based off of the news. And so with that, let's move right into the Svatove area, and we're going to back this up with some video segments. Starting off in Svatove, we know that the Russians are guarding Svatove as best as they can. Svatove is one of the major cities in the northeastern area on the current front line that the Ukrainians have, and so for this reason, they have a pretty sizable garrison right outside the town. These front lines are not accurate. As far as we know, the Ukrainians have not made it to the gates of the town and the houses that make up the outskirts, so the Russian defensive line is most likely still extending out to the P07 a little bit in the P66, kind of in a semicircle, or even more so in a straight line the further south we go. As far as we know, they do have a pretty good hold on the P66 highway, but we're going to make the front line shape like this for now. We assume that there is about 5 BTGs worth of strength in the Svatove area, an excessively high amount, and this amount may increase now that the Russians have pulled off their retreat in the Svatove area. So let me put this right here, Russian defenses, and we are going to make sure to fill in this color orange to make it a little bit different. And so that's the current defensive position we're seeing right now. If the Russians lose Svatove, they lose one of the last, I guess you could say, vertical roads on the front line that travels all the way from Troitske down to Svatove and then even further south down towards Kreminna. If they lose Svatove, the entire front line south of it could be compromised, and they may have to retreat to a more suitable ground where they can launch a better defensive. This means that the Russians, in the end, may have to retreat all the way back towards Starobilsk in this highway, the T1302. Oh my God. Has it been a minute since we've ever talked about the T1302 highway? Y'all may remember that from months ago when that was the linchpin that if the Russians overran it, the Ukrainians would have to withdraw from Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. They did do that months ago, and now it's coming into play again. Because if the Ukrainians are able to take Svatove, the Russians will fall back onto that highway. And that's really the only place that they get supplies. They wouldn't fall directly onto it. It'd most likely be around somewhere near Novoborove. But one thing's for certain, if you look at the front line, once it shapes up in that area, you will see that Severodonetsk and Lysychansk's rear is being directly threatened by a Ukrainian push. And if the Ukrainians pushed any further, the Russians in Severodonetsk and Lysychansk would almost be entirely cut off from supplies, except for the P66 going south from Lysychansk. And that is nothing to rely on. Having only one supply line connection to the rest of your forces is incredibly precarious, especially considering that that highway is within Ukrainian artillery range at this very moment, meaning that they would practically be cut off, and they would be facing a very slow, grinding defeat in Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, where they'd be taking massive amounts of losses and not getting any gain from it. So if the Russians did lose Svatove and they had to start falling back towards Starobilsk, they may as well have already lost Severodonetsk and Lysychansk by collateral. And now you can see why Svatove is now a very important part on the front lines. It pretty much will decide the fate of the entire northeastern area going here forward. And in the videos today, we saw the first signs of snowfall. And this changes the entire situation that I've been talking about. But let's watch this clip. We hear them playing some music. Of course, gotta mute that. But these guys look warm. Look at the inside of that hood. That thing is thick.
That looks cozy.
That honestly looks cozy. And he's got a nice balaclava. Like, this guy is ready for the winter weather. And you see that he's got a pretty thick padded jacket down there as well. So the Ukrainians, as you can see, they have been prepared for winter. They're ready for it. And also, is that a DP-28 or a DP-27? It is. Nice. I like those. Although they're quite old. They're almost 100 years old. When you see this guy, not as kitted up as this guy, but still, he's ready for the winter weather. He'll endure it fine.
Is the snow going to slow down the Ukrainians more, or will it slow down the Russians more?
It's going to slow down the Russians a load more. And also, it's going to have a massive amount. It's going to cause a lot of attrition on Russian forces. And and we'll take a minute to explain that here because that's very important. Weather is one of the largest determining factors of how the day-by-day war unfolds. And now that we see snow falling and also the temperature in Ukraine has plummeted, this is going to be affecting the Russians massively. Not so much the Ukrainians, and it all comes down to the equipment that they're using. The Ukrainians, as we've already seen in this video, have gotten a pretty decent amount of winter gear in this area, and once the snow started falling and the temperature started dropping, they were already ready for what was coming. The Russians, on the other hand, from what we can tell, they're not. They're still wearing summer weather uniforms, and they haven't gotten any kind of additional protection from the elements, and so Russian forces will start to be heavily limited in how long they can last outside of any kind of camp or trench. In a camp or a trench, there can be a fire, and all these soldiers can huddle around this fire and stop themselves from freezing to death. But once they start to leave that fire, and due to the lack of winter gear that they have, they will begin to slowly freeze. And so the amount of time that they can spend out of camp and patrolling the front lines and holding those lines is going to be incredibly decreased compared to the Ukrainians, which will be able to move still with relative ease compared to the Russians because they will be kept warm by their clothes. The other thing, probably much more important than the Russians and their winter weather equipped to the soldier, is their supply lines. Supply lines begin to slow down in winter weather, mostly because it becomes a lot more difficult to move, especially in places like Ukraine and Russia, where blizzards and literal just inhospitable weather in the winter can stop units from moving altogether, almost entirely. And so the supply lines will start to be decreased in their efficiency because of that. And also, due to, I guess, and this is something a little bit, that's a little bit complicated. The winter will start to freeze over the Rasputitsa that was caused in this fall and will make the roads solid. But if you use these roads in excessively high amount, the dirt roads, they will start to turn into a muddy slush again. And the snow, which will constantly be falling, only makes it worse. The Rasputitsa doesn't really end until the summer again if the road's being heavily used. And so the roads for the Russians, if they're using one corridor, like we're most likely assuming, the P-07 from Starbil to Svatove, they're not going to be able to supply their forces well because that road could turn into a slush, or any adjacent roads leading off of the P-07 could also turn into mud slushes as well and completely stop any kind of Russian supply efforts in their tracks. And so not only would the Russian soldiers be freezing, they wouldn't have any ammunition, they wouldn't have any food, they wouldn't probably have any kind of heating oil or firewood to keep themselves warm and stop themselves from freezing to death. And so we'll probably see, much like the term shrinkage, that the Russians will begin to retreat to try and get closer to the original supply hubs, so that way their soldiers don't end up freezing to death, and it becomes a constant, not really a meat grinder, but a meat freezer, where people just freeze to death on the front lines, and due to those casualties, they have to be replaced, or they get some kind of, what's it called? What's it called, Matthew, when you freeze so badly, your arms start to... Yeah, frostbite. They might get frostbite so bad that they end up being casualties anyways, have to get amputations of their fingers or their toes to the point that they're no longer able to fight, and then they're sent back, and then they have to be replaced by someone else, which will also cause a massive strain on the Russian army again. And so it's going to, the winter is really going to be affecting them terribly. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, we've already seen, like during the fall, that their supply lines are great. Not only have they been able to keep up with the very fast-paced actions of the Ukrainians in terms of their offensives at this point in the war, they've also been able to supply them with additional luxuries, like winter gear, in preparation for the weather that's come already. And so in those regards, the Ukrainians will be doing a whole lot better than the Russians will be here on the onset of winter, and they'll most likely be doing very well leading further into the winter months, because the Russians will be trying to play catch up and get their units up to speed with the winter weather and what they're having to live in, while the Ukrainians will just be at the point of supplying and keeping the momentum of their winter gear prepared soldiers going. That was a poorly explained line, but I hope I got the point across. Moving on into the area of Svatove, however, we did see a javelin in use. And so, here's a video of the Ukrainians using the javelin, and once again, Saint Javelin is over the boys on the field. So let's check this out. We can see him on an ATV. You see him lining up the javelin. We can see him firing it. It's now traveling across the fields. And I've got to be honest with y'all. While this was brought into the eastern area, somewhere in the northeast, the weather doesn't match what we've seen today. Snow has already fallen today. So I believe this video may be a little bit old, but brand new, considering that the weather doesn't line up. But we did see them knock out another tank in the Svatove area probably a week or two ago. And it's nice to know that the Russians are still taking losses at this point. Moving on into the other part of Svatove, we can see once again more destroyed Russians. It appears that an entire column was destroyed where it was on the road. And so with that, here's the video. See them passing by, and Euro 4320.
They got burned up.
Slightly rusted. You know something I was thinking, Matthew? This would be the perfect time for restoration videos, like restoration channels, you know the ones I'm talking about?
Yeah.
To pop up in Ukraine, because they got those stupid, cruddy-looking trucks, you know, they can pull out like an angle grinder and get to work getting the rust off the thing.
Yeah, vehicle restoration with the side of, war.
Yeah, vehicle restoration, maybe start a mortician's channel on the side. We can also see a little fuel trailer right there. Look at that. Oh, isn't that cute? I bet you that thing blew up and burned like hell when that thing got hit. Well, it didn't blow up and burn like hell. It's still here, so I'm talking out my ass. But anyways, we can see another 4320 destroyed. And even another one. Actually, that's kamikaze. Just lined up in a neat little row. And another one. We can hear some artillery exploding in the distance, and with that, that's the end of the video. But it's nice to see that another supply convoy has been destroyed in the area. And once again, you have to remember that the constant pressure and stress being put on the Russian supply forces by Ukrainian artillery and also Ukrainian drone forces is also adding an undue amount of stress, already leading into this very strenuous time of the year for supply lines that they have to account for. Russian convoys may never make it to the units that they're trying to supply because the Ukrainians are destroying them en route. And so if they're doing that, on top of the lack of supplies already making it to the front lines because of the complications from the winter weather, some Russian units may go without supplies altogether. And when men on the front lines are put into desperate situations, they most likely will end up surrendering or succumbing to the weather. That's what we're most likely going to be seeing. And so I would expect that the Ukrainians would most likely be making some kind of offensive in this area, seeing that the Russians are doing quite poorly and may not survive the winter as it's already going right now. Moving further south of Svatove, however, we can see that the Ukrainians are continuing their activities on the southern flank as they are hitting Russians down here with artillery as well. And so let's check out this video and see how it's going. So real quick, we can see some Russians on a field trip walking through the forest and trying to identify some trees, which I've had to do in a college class, but that little tree identifying course is cut short by an artillery shell that lands amongst all of them and tells them that little artillery piece right there identified them as cargo 300s and cargo 200s. So it's nice to see that they can at least count. At least they got that going for them. And so with that, once again, we can see that the Ukrainians are battering the Russians with artillery in this area, and we would assume that because of that, they're not going to be having that fun of a time. We might actually see that they'll begin to fall back, accompanied with the weather. Moving further on down the P-66 highway and towards Currrent, we can also see a Ukrainian BTR-4 firing in the winter weather. Note that the snowfall isn't that severe right now, and it most likely won't get thick. At the most, it'll probably be about 6 inches tall on average in most places, or even less. I would honestly say that 6 inches would be a bit of an extreme, but we can see this BTR-4 in action in the winter weather. You hear it firing off. again. And with that, that's the end of the video. And another thing that's really bizarre to see, and we haven't really had to think or talk about since February, when the last time snow was ever on the fields in Ukraine, is how much summer camouflage vehicles stick out in winter weather. These BTR-4s, like that one right there, and this one as well, they stick out so visibly well against the white of the snow. And I'm wondering, as we see this war go on, are the Ukrainians or the Russians, we know the Russians won't, because in February they didn't paint any of their vehicles into winter camo, or just a solid white. I wonder if the Ukrainians will begin to paint over the camouflage that these vehicles have, and start to paint them in solid white, so that way they'll blend in with the snow. One can only wonder on that one, though. We'll have to see as the war goes on if they do spend a massive amount of time and energy doing that. But it is pretty interesting to see the contrast of the vehicles compared to the environment they now find themselves in. However, moving a little bit further behind the lines, we can see that these BTR-4s are being supported by somewhat older but still effective AA systems that we can find in the OSA. So let's take a quick look at this little video of the Ukrainians showing us how their 9K33 OSAs work. And so here's the video.
Думали, що стара бричка така не дуже якби на щось згодна, але як показала Вінонька, оця бричка бачить всі літаки, всі БПЛА, всі ракети. Ми навіть бачимо снаряди, які приземляються.
Where you see the OSA deploying its radar.
Я накажу, він валить.
You can also see the inside of the OSA. And I've got, this is honestly funny to me, Matthew. This stuff looks like something from a sci-fi 1960s show.
It does.
And it's a little bit crazy to me to think that both the Russians and the Ukrainians, more so, it's crazier to think that the Russians are still using equipment like this, and that the Ukrainians are, and that this war in some degrees is being fought on both sides like it's still the 1960s and the 70s.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really wild.
And once again, I want all of our viewers to think about this. This right here may be a Ukrainian OSA, but the Russians use these in mass as well. This is one of their most common short-range surface-to-air missile systems that they still use. And this thing came into service in the 70s, the early 70s, around 1972. That means that this thing is about 50 years, it's exactly 50 years old at this point, if it was from 1972. And this is what the Russians would use in a land war against the United States. It's bizarre to think that the technology gap is that big, and it's really even crazier to me to think that a country with a technology gap that big was able to fool most of the world into thinking that their technology was on par with the West this entire time. I don't really know how they did that. I don't really know why a lot of people believed it even, but still, it's crazy to think about.
В принципі, ми включаємо радіолокаційну станцію, це високі лучі.
Well, you see the radar is not deployed in this
на
video.
показуються точки, є поміхи, є цілі. На високому ми працюємо максимум 30
Well,
секунд.
you see the soldier explaining how the system works.
У кожного літака, у кожної є ракети ПРР, протирелокаційна ракета. Тільки ми включаємо високе, зразу ж у них теж є радіолокаційні точки, і нас зразу ж показують, відразу. Навіть якщо ви виключили та переїхали, вона летить на останню точку, де було зафіксоване. Тому і кожен літак обладнаний цією ракетою. Ми повинні за 30 секунд включитись, знайти із кучу там поміг нашу ціль, хапнути її на АЕС і зразу виключаємось. От, виходить, цілі вже ведуться без радіолокаційної станції.
We now hear the OSA firing. Now we can see from outside the OSA, the missile on its way.
Азимут 135.
And with that, that's the end of the video. But an interesting look at the OSA Air AA systems. Why do I stutter so much sometimes? But when you see the OSA AA system in action here and knocking out Russian air targets, we didn't get to see it impact the target, but we did get to see how it operates. And still, I don't know about y'all, but it's just crazy to me to think this is what the Ukrainians and the Russians use. Mostly the Ukrainians because they're a former Soviet country and they've not really had a great time economically ever since, much like any former Soviet country. So they haven't been able to buy new and modern equipment to help themselves out. But it's just crazy to me to think that both sides are still using this kind of stuff. And hopefully the West can help to replace these systems with more advanced ones. Although we have seen, and we finally heard, that it's not a rumor, the Hawk SAM missile systems have made it to Ukraine and will be deployed here soon.
Oh, goodness.
Oh my god. Look at that thing.
It might be a little outdated, maybe.
A little outdated. These things went into service in the late 50s.
Yeah, it looks like something that was designed from that era too. Like it looks kind of
Yeah.
like kind of wild in design.
It
It's like
hon-
it's nothing but a trailer with some missiles sitting on top of it.
I gotta be honest with you, this looks like something straight out of the Jetsons. You
Yeah,
know,
it
like
does.
it's just that old. But anyways, I was going to go into this whole entire thing about AA systems from the West, but I feel like we could save that for another time probably. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from this little clip of the OSA in action behind the lines, and it is good to know. And this is one thing: while it's dated, you got to remember what it's going up against. This dated Ukrainian OSA is going up against dated Russian equipment. So in that comparison, the Ukrainians are on par technologically. And so that OSA, when compared to its peers on the Russian side, all in all, the difference will come down to training. How well are Ukrainian soldiers trained compared to Russian soldiers? And we already know that is leaps and bounds above Russian forces, and for that reason, they will do better. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on out of the Northeastern area. Once again, it appears that the Russians are going to be having a very tough time here due to the weather, the supply line situations that will come from it, and also the lack of their soldiers having any kind of winter gear. So we are expecting that the Ukrainians will most likely take the ground in this area, and the Russians will be forced to fall back into more suitable defensive positions, most likely along this blue line here that highlights the Idar River. I had to make sure I got that correct. They will most likely be falling back to that area because it allows them, once again, a natural barrier to try and defend themselves from the Ukrainians and try and alleviate the stress on their already overstressed and overworked supply lines. However, moving on further south into the area of Verkno-Kamyanka, this area has fallen completely silent. It's very common for this bulge in the line to be silent, although there's a lot of potential here, considering that the bulge juts outwards towards Lysychansk. The Ukrainians and the Russians have chances here to try and encircle one or the other, but we never see any action here, which is quite interesting. Moving on down, however, into the Bakhmut area, we have seen that the Russians have completely retired from the field as of today. We've gotten no video evidence of any massive shellings, any infantry firefights. Both of the videos we got from Bakhmut today were of Ukrainian drone activity, and so it appears that the Ukrainian defenses were able to hold the line. The Russian offensive here has finally petered out and stopped, and we're now seeing that the Ukrainians are using this moment to inflict casualties on the Russians with their drone forces. And so both of these go to the 30th Mechanized Brigade, and let's watch them pick away at the Russian forces. We see the bomblet drop, and the bomblet explode right on the Russians, blowing up an ammunition crate, and now the Russians have a free fireworks show. We can now see them dropping another bomblet on a different part of the front lines, and hitting right onto a Russian position.
Oh!
Oh! We can now see another bomblet drop, and it explodes in a trench. We now see another one drop, and it also explodes in a trench as well. What do you know? You
gotta appreciate the precision, how high that is in the air, and how good it hit on the trench.
Yeah, and it hits right in the same. Ooh, that was nice.
Oh, it hit something.
Oh, buddy, it hit something, and it went up like a firecracker. Now you see another bomblet being dropped. It hits on, I believe, a covered dugout. Well, you now see them going to the same spot that they were at the start and hitting it again. And this time another box goes up to the left of the explosion. You now see the drone wiggling its way across the lines, taking a look. We see a Russian sleeping right there. Shh, don't disturb him.
Oh, pretty accurate.
Yeah. And now you can see this guy right here who looks like a I don't know, an Eastern European version of James Bond. I don't know what he's saying. But with that, that's the end of the video. And once again, credit to the 30th Mechanized Brigade for knocking out a decent amount of Russians with drone bomblets alone. Not the heaviest hitting thing they have, but still, it does pack quite a punch. Sometimes they say that big things come in small packages, and I guess that's true. Moving on to the next bit, we saw the 30th Mechanized Brigade once again using their drones in another part of the front line and taking out even more Russian forces. You can already hear the music. And I guess that the Russians are also facing the music as these bombs land right on top of them and explode. We now see a bomblet falling on what appears to be an ammunition storage, although nothing exploded.
Watch it be like fake ammunition, like they're all duds.
Yeah, I think that these are all expended tubes. Although that one is smoking right there. Now I can see the entire hill getting hit with MLRS batteries. I don't even know what in the world that is. But they did get it. That's one thing we can confirm. And so with that, while we laugh at these Russians getting obliterated, because I want to make sure that we always make it clear, yes, we are laughing at the Russians getting obliterated. That's the end of the video, and it's nice to see that the 30th Mechanized Brigade has once again been helping to absolutely blast Russians, so that way all of us can get a pretty good feeling out of knowing that the Russians will eventually be pushed out of this area as well, and that their offensive has been completely stopped. The Russians did make ground here in this area, and speaking of the actual frontline situation, the Russians are in a position to hold the area of Bakhmut. If we move over to Google Maps, and we take a look, and I'm going to try and get us onto the terrain layers around Bakhmut, we can see that out here in the distance around Bakhmut, Bakhmut is kind of in a bowl, in a way. It has hills surrounding it, and also hills out here like a ridgeline north of Soledar, and the Russians do hold this, and so if the Ukrainians want to advance forward, they will be advancing under the eyes of Russian forces in this area. And so for once, it actually looks like the Russians are positioned to hold the area, but once again, we have to remember that while they are in a great position geographically, they aren't really in a great position in any other regard. Once again, the supply lines here are weak. Their forces have probably been depleted in this area due to the massive amount of casualties they've been taking in the offensive of Bakhmut. And so if the Ukrainians did counterattack here in the future, they would probably be met with great deals of success and probably would be able to also retake these ridges overlooking the town of Bakhmut, which would then position the Ukrainian forces for offensives in the future. And so it does look promising in this area, and it is good to see, based off video evidence, that the Russians have finally halted their offensives, and now it's time for us to move on down into the area of Donetsk and into the Pisky area, where we've seen that Ukrainian infantry was lying low and also watching one of their jets fly overhead. And so here's the video. See Ukrainians taking a break, and there is one of their Su-27s flying over the lines and getting ready to attack Russians. We see them firing off some ordnance up there. We don't know exactly what kind, but we can see it now flying over the rolling hills of Ukraine in the area. And with that, that's the end of the video. And you know that's got to be a huge morale booster for Ukrainian infantry to watch their Air Force flying above and firing off rockets to hit Russians who knows where, doing who knows what. But one thing that they will be doing soon is going 6 feet under. And so with that, we're now going to be...
Was that the lunch break entertainment?
That would be the lunch break entertainment. They're like, all right, guys, take 5. And while we take 5, here's the halftime show of the Su-27 obliterating the orcs. And so then they started off the show. And so that's the end of the video, and we're now going to be moving on a little bit further south into the area of Oleksandrivka and Marinka, where we saw that the Ukrainians once again were using the lull in the fighting to drop bomblets onto Russian forces. And once again, this lull, while it doesn't give us a lot of frontline action to report on, it does give us a very clear sign that the Russians are having some very bad times supply-wise, and they aren't conducting any kind of activities whatsoever. And so the ball is entirely within Ukraine's court as of today. The Russians aren't doing anything. The Ukrainians have all of the leeway to do whatever they want in the future. You see the Russians here on this road highlighted in infrared. You now see them all taking cover on the side of the road, but one thing they don't understand is that no matter where they hide, this drone will see them. And that's not just trying to make it sound cool or anything, that's just the truth. We can now see the drone flying right over them. And you know, they're just chilling on the side of the road, laying low, reading a book. Now I see the Ukrainians scrolling through the Xbox Live menu and trying to see if their friends are online. And we can now see that the bomblet has dropped right on top of them. And a second bomblet is also dropped on top of them. And we now see that the aircraft will automatically go home.
The aircraft was already called today. It was like, okay, I've done my job, time to go home.
Yeah, it's like, hey, listen, man, I'm on the clock here, all right? And it's like it drops the bomb. It's like, I'm off. I'm getting off work right now. But with that, that's the end of the video, and it's nice to see that the Ukrainians are still using this moment in the front lines to continue the operations from their drone forces and smack down some bomblets pretty effectively onto the Russian forces below. Of course, always got to remember, the drone does have a battery now, and also, hey, it's time for my lunch break, man. I've been on work for 8 hours. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next area of the front lines, and while we have gotten some news of drone forces and aircraft from the Ukrainian armed forces operating in this area, it does appear that the front line here is stagnant. And while the Russians are having massive supply line issues from what we can tell, due to the lack of fighting and also the massive amount of casualties that they've taken, there will probably never be any action in the direct area of Donetsk, at least from east to west. The front line here is incredibly well defended. You can see this when you actually look at Google Maps, and I'll show you all this here for a second, because we don't show this off often. So we scroll through here, and I'm trying to find it real quick for y'all. Y'all will actually see trench works, like this one here. And this satellite image was taken at some point in 2021. So this was about a couple of months before the war began. And you can see trenches everywhere. Here's some trenches, destroyed buildings. You can see Russian trenches here on the other side that zigzag their way up to the front. They're everywhere. This area is heavily defended. And over the course of 2016 to 2022, both sides made these defensive positions the best they could. They took advantage of every height, every nook, every cranny. They dug the trenches the best they could. And so, in those regards, this area is a fortress on both sides. We'll probably never see advances make any meaningful or sizable amounts of ground in this area. It's really shocking to even see that sometimes people say that there will be massive amounts of ground made by a Russian push in this area, because what they don't realize is that the Russians are not pushing into open ground like they are in other parts of the front line. They are pushing into the Siegfried line, or the Maginot line of Ukraine, filled with massive amounts of trenches, reserve trench on reserve trench, kill zones all over, ATGM set up in perfect positions on the slag heaps that are outside of Donetsk. It is going to practically be impossible for any side to make any ground. And so, in that regard, and seeing that the Russians have been trying to conduct offensives from this area, all for it. I hope that they continue to conduct offensives from this area, because they will never make any ground, and it's going to be a constant drain on Russian supplies and manpower reserves that they can't use anywhere else because they're being expended there. And so with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Donetsk area and on down into the southern front. And as you can see, the front line here has completely stopped. There's once again no activity down here whatsoever, once again showing that the Russians have been defeated in their offensive at Volodar. From what we could tell, the Russians were once again trying the pig-headed tactic of pushing directly down the T-0509 towards the town. I guess their end goal would have been Velika Novosilka, considering that that's the very end of this major roadway, which means that they would have had a sizable supply corridor to help their forces push further inland and towards Zaporizhia and Dnipro, although there's a massive amount of ground in between where they would be and there. But that would be the larger big picture move here. The Ukrainian forces in this area actually had a really tough time at the start. They almost got pushed out of their positions, and we did see the Battle of the Five Men, where some Ukrainian units, like theirs, were entirely surrounded by the Russians for about a day. The Ukrainian reinforcements would come through and help to push back the Russians a little bit out of the direct vicinity of the Volodar, Pavlivka, Yahorivka front line and would hold them there. The Russians took on massive amounts of casualties for about the past 2 weeks, and finally we've seen them retire from the field. We haven't heard any activity here over the past 2 or 3 days, at least in terms of actual size, and the activity we have seen, the very little that there is, has been Ukrainian forces firing back at the Russians and largely stymieing any attempt at a reorganization and offensive there again. And so it appears that the Russians have stopped their offensive in this part of the front line and probably will remain to do that for the next several months. If we could expect an offensive from the Russians in the southern front again, which will be highly unlikely and very rare over the course of this war, it will most likely be coming from some direction like Huilopol towards Pokrovsk or from Vasilivka directly towards Zaporizhia. This area is probably the most heavily defended by the Ukrainians in between Vasilivka and Turikov, so that is highly unlikely, considering that that a military always follows the path of least resistance. They always try and exploit weak points. And so we most likely will see them try and attempt another offensive, the Russians at least, in the Huilopol and Pokrovsk direction, or they could try a second offensive from Pavlivka to Velika Novosilka, Or they could try once again, although it seems like it's largely died off at this point, another Marinka offensive to also try and head towards Velika Novosilka, or to try and cut off Ukrainian forces in the direction of Pokrovsk further to the north. There are actually several Pokrovsk. We can see one here with a apostrophe in it, and then we can see one here without an apostrophe and lacking an E, which makes it kind of difficult to talk about the front line sometimes. Anyways, moving on to the only bit of activity we saw in the area of Zaporizhia, or the Zaporizhia front line, was near the town of Mala Tokmachka, where we saw a Ukrainian drone destroying a Russian checkpoint. And so with that, here's the video. And also, let me know if y'all are enjoying this extra level of detail tonight. I really enjoy going into this level of detail, so let me know if y'all like it, and we may make this a normal go-to explanation, normal go-to format for the way we explain news going forward. And so with that, here's the video. We can hear some pretty decent music. We can see a bomblet being dropped right onto, once again, exposed mines on the road. I don't know why the Russians do that. It's not like it's going to get anyone, because you can see them from a quarter-mile away. But one thing that it did get was this checkpoint destroyed.
Dang.
And also, how did you like it? The Russian flag, you could see it right over here. The blast was so strong that it just literally tore into tethers.
Just right the way it belongs, in pieces.
Just like the Russian government. And so with that, that's the end of that video, and we didn't get any more news out of the Southern Front rather than that. However, we will expect that this front line remains largely stagnant going forward. Moving on into the Kherson area, however, we have been getting small amounts of news, starting off with a nice case of friendly fire. Now, we remember the Russian Special Needs Force is firing at the boat that was trying to cross the small canal the other day, but we can see that the Russians have made sure to remove the remainder of the IQ from the rest of their forces and kamikaze droned one of their own. Wait a minute, hang on. This is actually a different video. We're going to go to the other one that I'm actually talking about. They destroyed one of their own radar installations while it was still being used. This was just genius. Whoever came up with this strategy was very smart, because the Russians helped to destroy their own radar installation right here, and as far as we know, it was still being operated at the time of this kamikaze attack. When you see them taking a good look at it, you know, they're about to destroy the Devil, which is apparently their own forces. And we now see the kamikaze drone making its way on its final approach, right for the Russians inside the freaking radar installation. We see it flying in right there, and there went about 3 or 4 Russians inside of that radar post, and about a $30 to $50 million radar. I love it. I mean, if the Russians
Good job, Ivan.
If the Russians aren't screwing themselves over, they're getting screwed over by the Ukrainians. It's a screw or be screwed world, and the Russians are just on the screw side. They're not even well, they're on the screwed side. They're not even screwing anyone. They just get screwed by themselves, and the Ukrainians as well. And so with that, that's the end of that video. And say what, Matthew?
I said, dang.
And we're now going to be moving on to an area in the Kherson pocket where we can, well, the recaptured Kherson pocket, where we can see that a new unit called the Tsunami Battalion is moving around and helping to destroy mines and munitions that they're finding behind the lines to make the land safer for the Ukrainians to live on. And so with that, here's the video. You see them getting ready for a detonation. The special detonation operation. I had to do it. It rhymes. They're all ready, but the explosion hasn't happened yet. They've pulled that Tom
That one guy's not worried about covering his ears.
He's too cool for hearing loss. But we can hear it explode in the distance. And it was actually quite a sizable explosion out there. Now fire is billowing out of the area where the explosion occurred, and smoke as well. We don't know what exactly blew up down there.
Що це було? Це була противотанкова міна.
ТМ-72.
Так, а тепер розкажіть, а хто ви?
I gotta say, this is kind of off topic, but that black Land Cruiser over there is sick.
Wait, where was it? I didn't see it. I think I was.
It's behind the green ones.
Oh hell!
Man, that is
that is
sick.
Dude, that's like a Mountain Brook car. That's like
Yeah,
something.
that is like a special ops looking kind of truck. That's pretty cool.
Oh man, that is actually nice. It needs a wash, but that is a nice car for sure.
Що це було?
Це була противотанкова міна.
ТМ-72.
Так, а тепер розкажіть, а хто ви?
Also, what do we got right here? This guy is like the definition of cool. He's got the purple tinted sunglasses, the beard, he's smoking a cigarette. Like, this guy is the coolest man on earth. Like he's the reason why the Ukrainian winter has come a little early, is because he's just so cool. He's cooled the whole air around him.
He drives the Land Cruiser for sure.
Yeah, he drives the Land
Звідки
Cruiser.
сам?
Я сам з Одеси, служу в 126-й бригаді ТРО в составі зведеного закону цунамі. Родом з Ніколаївської області, служу в 126-му батальйоні ТРО.
Цунамі.
Зведений загін.
Tsunami.
126-та бригада, окрема бригада ТРО.
Like the beanie.
Залучений до батальйону «Цунамі».
Славний батальйон «Цунамі». Звідки родом?
Tsunami.
This guy didn't respond. He had the AirPods in. He said, Slava Tsunami. And this guy was just like, what?
Славний батальйон «Цунамі».
He didn't hear.
Звідки родом?
Львів.
Львів.
Так само. Родом з Вінниці, живу в Одесі.
Добрий день, слава Україні.
Поліція? Сам. А в мирному житті хто?
Все в магазині.
Nice sunflower. I saw the sunflower in his
Як
vest.
настрій?
Нормально, як завжди.
Релакс.
He did like
That dude's like, get out of my face.
he did like a cinematic spin around his head, and that guy was just confused. He's like, "What the hell are you doing?"
Релакс.
It was a pretty good.
Tsunami.
It was a pretty good video until that guy, and then that guy was just confused by it. He was like, "What the hell are you even doing?" But with that, that's the end of the video, and it's nice to see that the Ukrainians are forming new units to move around the rear areas that have been recaptured and help to demine and clear the area of explosives, so that way people can actually go about living their lives again without the fear of blowing up just randomly. Moving on into Kherson City, we've also seen that the Ukrainians have been helping to alleviate the pressures and stress that's been caused on Kherson due to almost the entirety of the city's basic utilities and infrastructure being destroyed by the Russians in their withdrawal. And we can see here that they've set up a warm spot, quote unquote, in this tent. This tent has apparently some hot drinks, some food, and a place to charge their phones and use the internet. In short, it is an internet cafe, much like Starbucks, but probably with affordable prices. And also, it looks kind of nice in there. They got a really nice table.
Yeah, it looks pretty nice.
Yeah. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to a little bit of unfortunate news. We'll follow this up with a high note. But we have seen evidence that the Russians were also torturing and killing Ukrainian citizens within the city of Kherson. And so without further ado, I'm going to share this video with you all, courtesy of Radio Free Europe.
Это пыточная Херсона. Она размещается в помещении Херсонского СИЗО. Именно сюда, вот в эти комнатки, свозили неугодных российской оккупационной власти. Именно здесь они ждали своих допросов.
Були охоронці, якщо я вірно розумію, це були службовці Росгвардії. Одна ротація більше била, більше кормила, інша ротація менше била, але менше кормила. Ти знаходишся на якомусь стільці, зв'язані руки, на голові шапка, і коли щось не подобається, якщо розумів, це був електрошокер, яким били в район шиї вуха.
То від руки малювали, багато такого було, то вже шукали принтер, десь за рублі купляли, десь його нам завозили. Після митингів ми неодноразово потрапляли на ці підвали з допитами. Нашу затримали активістку на 3 тижні, тому що в неї просто знайшли вдома по якійсь наводці пакет жовтих стрічок. Кожен активіст знав, що ймовірно таке станеться.
вот, и все, они вот так вот стояли все по периметру, все с автоматами. Нельзя было смотреть. Бывало такое, всех загнали в магазин, ролеты позакривали. Сидим тут 10 минут, нікуди не виходимо.
І крики були такі, тут люди кричали. Ну, а ми проходили, що в магазин другий раз як ходили, то чуть було, а по ночам тут такі автоматні очереді були, кажуть, в потолок стріляли.
В Херсоне нету воды и нету света. В последнее время кое-где начинает появляться мобильная связь. Вот благодаря таким вот мобильным центрам. Они расставлены по всему городу, и всегда возле них собирается достаточно много людей. Местные говорят, что это едва ли не единственный способ связаться с внешним миром.
Well, that is the end of the video. Of course, courtesy to Radio Free Europe for providing us such an interesting insight and look into the atrocities that the Russians once again committed within the city of Kherson. And while that's incredibly unfortunate, one thing is good to know, and that's that the Ukrainian army is always making sure to avenge these people who have been tortured and killed by the Russians all around occupied Ukraine, as an artillery strike landed on the Russians in Oleski today on the other side of the Dnieper Reservoir, taking out a decent score of them. And on the bequest of one of our viewers, I asked that you do not say LOL when you see these Russians get obliterated, because apparently 270 days into the war and a million atrocities later, that's just not good enough. When you see the sign saying Oleski right there, and when you see the Russians set up at the checkpoint, and they just got obliterated. We can now see the vehicle smoking and burning, and the Russian checkpoint was knocked out. And with that, that's the end of the video, but I gotta say, it's nice to know that the Russians have a friend in the Ukrainian artillery, because wherever they go, the Ukrainian artillery is soon to follow. And so will that. Ending on that high note, we haven't gotten a lot of news from the Kherson area, and I would expect that we're not going to be hearing any news going forward from the Kherson area at all, rather than the occasional, I guess you could say clip here and there is the best way to explain it. The Dnieper River is incredibly wide. In its widest areas, in the reservoirs, it is almost 5 to 7 miles wide. At its narrowest, it's still about a half-mile wide. That is a massive obstacle to cross. In fact, in most wars, rivers are usually the dividing point. In most national borders that were not drawn up in the modern day, you'll see that rivers are what divide most countries. For example, well, this isn't really that great of an example, but if we look... Well, no, this is a great example. If we look at the French border here at Alsace-Lorraine near Strasbourg, you can actually see that the French-German border is on the Rhine River. It was a very distinct landmark. It clearly identified whose borders were where, and on top of that, it was also fairly difficult for one side to cross over the other, giving each nation a little bit of protection, instead of just saying, I declare war, and you're marching over open ground. And so, that's usually the case. And in the Kherson area, considering that the Dnieper River is so wide it makes the Rhine River look like a creek, I would assume that the Ukrainians are not going to be crossing this river, and the Russians and the Ukrainians will be moving the bulk of their forces that were here to other areas of the front line to continue on defensive or offensive operations elsewhere where there is definitely more opportunity. And so with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Kherson area and north to listen to the speech from President Zelensky on day 269 of the war in Ukraine. And so without further ado, here is the speech.
Шановні українці, протягом всієї доби енергетики працювали, щоб відновити нормальну технічну можливість постачання електрики. Завдяки чому сьогодні аварійних відключень вже значно менше. Станом на вечір у більшості областей, де тривають відключення, діяли саме стабілізаційні погодинні графіки. Аварійні ж відключення застосували більшою мірою на Одещині та в Києві. Важка ситуація з енергопостачанням зберігається загалом в 17 регіонах та столиці – Київщина і Київ. Дуже важко – Одещина, а ще Вінниччина і Тернопільщина. В Херсоні сьогодні відкрили спеціальні пункти незламності. Перші 2 буде більше. Поки налагоджується електрика в місті, люди можуть підзарядити телефони, зігрітися, випити чаю, отримати допомогу. Розгорнули там зв'язок, є старлінки, тощо. Ми знаємо, що людям дуже складно, бо окупанти зруйнували все перед втечею. Але
Can you bump up the volume a little bit, Enforcer?
I would love to, but this is the loudest it
Сьогодні в
gets.
Києві був
Oh, man.
віце-президент
Yeah,
Єврокомісії.
I don't know why they've jacked up the audio like this, but it's almost so quiet I can
Зокрема,
hardly hear
про
it.
енергетику також детально обговорили фінансову співпрацю між Україною та Євросоюзом, потреби нашої держави у фінансуванні до кінця року і в наступному році. Очікую в цьому році 2 транші макрофіну, 2,5 мільярди євро ще в листопаді і півмільярда євро на початку грудня. Обговорили і нові санкції проти Росії, які можуть бути введені на європейському рівні. Поспілкувався сьогодні зі студентською спільнотою Ірландії, країни, яка дуже принципово нас підтримує, хоча це нейтральна країна у військовому плані. Ірландія все ж міцно захищає європейські цінності і допомагає нам політично і гуманітарно. Я звернувся до ірландців з 2 проханнями. Перше, просувати на загальноєвропейському рівні необхідність посилювати санкції проти Росії. Друге, допомагати нам поширювати правду про події в Україні та про російський терор. Також звернувся до учасників безпекового форуму в канадському Галіфаксі. Це один з світових безпекових форумів. Ще раз представив українську формулу миру і запросив Канаду та інших наших партнерів обрати для себе такий компонент формули миру, в якому вони можуть проявити своє лідерство по максимуму. Саме в цьому і є сенс того, як ми викладаємо наші пропозиції щодо відновлення миру. Ми їх розклали на елементи, те, з чого складається російська агресія. І робимо все, щоб знешкодити кожен з цих елементів і щоб через це знешкодити агресора. Я щодня отримую дуже позитивний фідбек у світі на цей наш підхід. Провідні лідери підтримують українську конструктивність, і я вірю, що нам вдасться реалізувати нашу формулу миру. Наджорстокі бойові дії на Донеччині тривають і досі. Жодних пом'якшень боїв чи передишок не було. Тільки за вчорашню добу відбито близько 100 російських атак в Донецькій області. Всі наші воїни, які тримають позиції на Донбасі, справжні герої. Я хочу сьогодні особливо відзначити прикордонників Харківського і Сумського загонів, які зараз діють саме на Донеччині. Їхні мінометні розрахунки дуже допомагають, не даючи спокою окупантам. Це те, що треба. Хлопці, дякую вам. Також дякую бійцям 4-ї бригади оперативного призначення Нацгвардії, яка захищає Україну на Бахмутському напрямку. Розумна ініціатива і стійкість – це 2 речі, які забезпечують надзвичайно корисні результати. На жодній з ділянок фронту не пасуємо перед ворогом, всюди відповідаємо, всюди тримаємо позиції. На визначених ділянках готуємо майбутні успіхи. Говорив сьогодні з президентом Туреччини Ердоганом, подякував за зусилля для продовження нашої експортної зернової ініціативи. Обговорили ще й деталі нашої нової гуманітарної ініціативи Grain from Ukraine. Сподіваюсь, що Туреччина долучиться до її реалізації. Звичайно, приділили увагу і безпековій співпраці, і ситуації в енергетиці. Завтра у нас буде дуже активний день і зовсім не вихідний. Очікую новин, можливостей для України і вже готуємо для них відповідний ґрунт. А сьогодні хочу сказати ще одне – привітати усіх сержантів Збройних сил України з їхнім професійним днем. Сьогодні вже багато було сказано теплих слів і в армії, і в суспільстві. Сержанти – це дійсно ті люди, які забезпечують реальну єдність і взаєморозуміння між командирами і солдатами. Сержантський корпус – це справжня опора армії. Я дякую усім нашим сержантам, які вповні відповідають цим словам. Дякую кожному і кожній, хто зараз служить у наших силах оборони. Дякую усім, хто зробив захист України частиною своєї особистої долі. Слава нашим героям, вічна пам'ять і шана тим, хто віддав своє життя за свободу для українців. Слава Україні!
And with that,
Love Ukraine.
That is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, and that wraps out our day 269 summary of the news. I thank you all so much once again for watching. We're about to be moving into the question segment. We're going to answer everyone's super chats, and we're also going to be answering as many live chats as we can. But thank you all so much once again for watching this news. I'm highly honored that a load of y'all find this to be the place that y'all find news from, and I hope y'all enjoyed this news segment tonight. We've been trying to make some changes tonight specifically, and how we cover the news and the level of detail that we go into, so that way it is more news oriented. We have been having some difficulties with that in the past, considering that back in the day, we could really cover a massive amount of frontline detail because the Russians were the ones advancing, and so it was almost entirely Russian centralized, I guess you could say, in terms of the information. It was all about Russian movements, activities, and what they were going to be doing. But once the war started to change in its direction, we've been having a little bit of difficulty trying to find a way to cover the level of depth and detail we want without getting into operational security issues. So hopefully y'all enjoyed tonight's news segment. If y'all did, we will be covering the news like this from here forward. And with that, it's now time for us to move on from the end of the news and on into the question segment. But first, let's get to our polls. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so for our final question segment of the night, we have about 4 or 5 polls to get to. And the first one said, are you happy that the Enforcer is going to start resuming the map updates in more detail? It looks like 86% said, yes, I want more news. 8% said, not sure. And 6% said, nah, I'm good. But I would have to agree with the 86%. I think that the map updates are really good. Y'all should be able to leave the stream after it's over and be able to explain what's going on in Ukraine. And I think that is our new goal, I believe. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to definitely agree with that. I believe that is the best way to go about this. The news is supposed to be the news. And I felt like over the past few weeks, we're starting to turn more so into a react channel than news. That's not the original intent of this channel, and we're going to be trying to move the direction of the news back into actual information instead of just reacting to videos and giving a very vague summary of what the front line in that area looks like. And so with that, I'm glad that a load of y'all love that. I really like doing it tonight. I felt like a return back to form. And so with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll said, do you think the winter weather is going to severely hinder the military operations of? 65% said the Russians, 2% said the Ukrainians, and 33% said both will be affected. Now for me, I'm going to have to say I think both will be pretty severely affected. Probably more so the Russians, but I would have to say both. But Enforcer, what say you?
Both of them will be affected, but the Russians will certainly be affected to a heavier degree than the Ukrainians. That's something that you can see throughout war. One side will be heavily affected by winter weather due to their lack of preparation, and the other will not be. We saw this during the Napoleonic invasion of Russia in 1813 and 1814, where Napoleon was woefully unprepared for the winter weather that they would face inside of Russia. And as they marched further inland, they started to run out of supplies. They started to run out of, I guess you could say, anything to keep a military running. And by the time they reached Moscow, there was really nothing for them to live off of, while the Russians pretty much moved all of their supplies further back with their militaries. And so they were in a very good position going into the winter, and Napoleon's military was already freezing and starving to death by the time they began to leave Moscow. We could also see that at the same time with Hitler in the Second World War when he invaded the Soviet Union. The Germans were not prepared for the winter, and while the Russians were not that well off compared to the Germans logistically at that point in the war, they were acclimated to what the weather provided for, I guess you could say, in the Soviet Union. And if they had learned anything from the Winter War, it was that winter gear needed to be a priority, and so they already had a decent surplus of that by that point. The only problem was that issuing it to their forces posed a little bit of a problem. But still, you can see that throughout the course of history, one side is heavily affected by winter weather, while the other one is usually well prepared. And this time, I believe that the Ukrainians will definitely be the one that is far better prepared than the Russians, and we'll see that the Russians will certainly suffer as the winter months go on due to their lack of preparation. And so with that, I hope that answers that fairly well. And do you have anything to add to it, Matthew?
So that's everything I had to add to it. And the next poll says, do you think the USA was good to send the Hawk system, or was it pointless to send? It looks like 80% said Ukraine needs everything they can get, 15% said not sure, and 7% said it's pointless, it's too outdated. Now on this one, I've got to say that Ukraine certainly needs every weapon they can get. It's not pointless to send it, but at the same time, I kind of feel like maybe the United States is using Ukraine as a dumping ground for some of our old equipment that we don't use anymore. I would like to see newer equipment go to Ukraine, to be totally honest. I'm not saying the United States has a nefarious reason for sending that old equipment, but you know, it wouldn't hurt to send newer equipment. But Enforcer, what say you?
Let's take a look at the United States SAM systems, and let's see what we could possibly provide to them. So we can see the Hawk right here. Jesus. That thing is old. That thing is so old.
What's that thing in front of it, though?
This thing is like a little mechanized tractor. It tows it around. Also, I believe... No, I'm sorry, correction. I believe that's a motorized mount that they can put the Hawk on and move it around a little bit in the field. I think it has a small motor inside of it. I might be wrong with that statement, though, so take it with a grain of salt. But let's see. Self-propelled. So it looks like the only air defenses we have are Stingers. And let's see, let me make sure that we're getting this correct. Really just Stingers and Patriots, and maybe some NASAMs. And that's really all we have. The United States has never been strongly oriented in its doctrine, and for that reason, in terms of its equipment, with air defense systems. Because our reliance on air defense relies on the U.S. Air Force, and that's the reason why it's so large compared to other nations around the world, is that it's expected that the Air Force would be able to deal with any of these threats, and it wouldn't really be necessary for air defense systems to be in massive amounts and fielded heavily, because the Air Force would make those systems redundant. So the Hawk, I guess you could say, was our last actual fielded system that I guess you could call a proper surface-to-air missile defense system beyond the Patriot, which we know we will not send to Ukraine for security reasons. So in that regard, I guess we're sending the best we can, but it's just so dated that it may as well be pointless. There are other countries out there. Go ahead.
And also, Enforcer, I see some folks saying that the Hawks that we're sending are the upgraded versions, but even though they're upgraded, in my opinion, I still think that it's a little bit kind of weak that we're sending that old of equipment. I mean, is there not anything newer we can send? I mean, obviously don't send our newest stuff over there, so we're not giving away any of our like secrets, but there has to be something in between the newest and the oldest stuff that we can send.
Surprisingly enough, there really isn't. The United States has just never been strong in the surface-to-air missile defense systems, and that's why if you look at the Russians, like an S-300 or an S-400 is leaps and bounds, really, above the U.S. and SAM technology, because we never really went into SAM technology. We just didn't really care, because the Air Force was filling that role for us. And, you know, that's interesting in its own right, because that is probably one of the areas that the U.S. and the Russians completely diverge in doctrine, and where you see major differences is that the Russians have worked their doctrine around going up against the U.S. Air Force, and the Russian Air Force not being able to counter that threat. And the U.S. Air Force has worked around being able to counter Russian SAM batteries and using their overwhelming size and also technological advantage to crush the Russian Air Force and the SAM batteries as well. So we really don't have anything to give to them. And we can see here that if we look through the upgrades, we don't really get a lot of information on them on Wikipedia, sadly. But
what about the Patriot systems?
The Patriot systems, from what I know, are largely meant to shoot down, and let me see here, the New England Patriots. I'm just kidding. Let's go to the Patriot. The Patriot is a surface-to-air missile system. Let's see, what is it made to do? The Patriot was developed in Alabama, in Huntsville, which is good to know. Let's see here, Morag. Let's see. Introduction. Also, we can see here that its earliest concept looks a lot like a Hawk.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, it looks almost just like a Hawk, which is bizarre. But anyways, engage the drone. The Patriot will combine several new technologies. But what is its purpose? What can it target? What can it shoot down? We already know that it's made to shoot down incoming missiles. But what else can it shoot down? see here, the Patriot. Let's just type in what Patriot missile defense system. What can the Patriot shoot down? What can the Patriot shoot down? Let's see. Can counter tactical ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and sophisticated aircraft in all weather conditions, according to Eurasian Times. So it can target aircraft, but that is the cream of the crop of U.S. weapon systems, and we rarely ship those internationally. The last time that we sent a Patriot to anyone, it was the Taiwanese in the Republic of China. And so I highly doubt that we'll be sending those things out a lot. We can actually find a map of the current users. And so here's the list. Romania, Greece, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Kuwait, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Sweden, Germany, the Netherlands, Spain, Poland is a potential operator in the future, and that's it. And so we can see that a lot of these countries are either in NATO, and so their security is ensured by the United States. They're Western aligned, like the Japanese and South Koreans, or we have a resource interest like Qatar, the UAE, or Saudi Arabia, or Israel. So we can see there that it's very clear that we wouldn't give it to a country like Ukraine because we can't really safeguard Ukraine like we can all of the other countries that we've given these systems to. And also that may be a national security issue if we send them to Ukraine and one of them manages to get a very close look. Well, the Russians manage to get a very close look on one, or if they destroy one, or if one is somehow captured, that could end up really being detrimental to U.S. defense industries because that kind of technology could be found and looked at by the Russians. So I don't think we should send that to them. And so I guess in that regard, to answer that poll, I think that I would have to go with a large majority of y'all that anything is better than nothing because it's either the Hawks or nothing as far as U.S. technology is concerned. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question fairly well, the poll fairly well. And with that, we are now on into the next one.
All right. And the next one said, should the individual soldiers who participated in the torture be individually prosecuted? It looks like 93% said yes, hunt them and prosecute. And also, to add on top of that option, I would say hunt them, prosecute, and execute. 2% said maybe, not sure, and 5% said no, it's not possible. Go get the top dogs. Now, on this one, I've got to say, we need to hunt down the individual perpetrators. The top dogs are a given. We're going to have to get them separately, but don't let the little guys get away with doing this stuff on their own because they have an option to rebel if they could. They may face consequences, but to me, it seems like they should not be going through what they're doing. Following orders is not an excuse, in my opinion, but Enforcer, what do you think?
I would say that these soldiers should certainly face the music for their crimes. And I know that this sounds a little bit barbaric. Well, I honestly don't see the barbarism in it, but maybe some people think this sounds a little bit barbaric. I don't understand why a nation like Ukraine, especially given the current circumstances and seeing what the Russians have been doing to Ukrainian citizens and also Ukrainian soldiers who have been captured, I still find it very commendable of them in terms of their morality, but still, in a way, not necessarily on par, an eye for an eye kind of thing, with what the Russians are doing to them to not levy the death penalty against some of these people and what they've been doing. And it's really unbelievable to me because and let me say this as context, when we look at the Germans like Hermann Goering or Heinrich Himmler or Joseph Goebbels, and we watched them hang at the Nuremberg trials on film, everyone's like, oh, they deserved it. And that was pretty much the same context as what we're looking at right now with Russian war criminals, and I really don't see much of a difference. Now, I know that that's a little bit of a hard thing to argue these days because now it's become a little bit of a contentious topic, but I believe that the punishment should fit the crime, and if you were responsible for a war crime, regardless of what it was, that ended up killing a Ukrainian citizen or countless Ukrainian citizens, then there should be the chance that they face the death penalty depending on what a tribunal finds them to be held accountable for and what the punishment should be. I feel like that should be an option, but regardless, that's not on the table. I feel like they should still face the maximum amount of punishment needed to counter what they've done. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well, and it seems like it's fairly unanimous that a lot of people would like them to face the music. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, let me finish typing up this one. All right. So I'm just finishing up a poll real quick. Enforcer, so if you could stall for just a second.
So while we're stalling here for a second, did y'all know that there's a certain stall noise that comes out of Boeing aircraft when you stall the planes? It goes something like rip, 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 sync rate, pull up, rip, 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 rip. And you know, it's a pretty interesting sound. There's a lot of different stall sounds in all kinds of aircraft. Airbus has a different sound. Boeing has a different sound. Even some military aircraft made by Boeing have slightly different sounds for when they stall.
All right.
And with that, there's the history of stalling while I stalled for Matthew to put up a poll. And so with that, we are on to the next poll.
Okay, so that poll just went up, so we can't address that one just yet. But it looks like this one's going to be almost unanimous from what it's looking like right now. So let me check through here real quick. All right, so with that being said, that was our last poll for the moment. So we are moving on to our super chats. And up first, we have
You just cut out there, Matthew.
a extremely generous $100 super chat.
Hang on, Matthew. Hang on. We're having some
nani?
very bad connection issues. Oh, nani? I don't know what was up with that because it shows that our connection's fine, but can you reread that one again?
All right, so moving back to our super chats, we have a very generous $400 super chat from Walter A. Lakota Jr. And Walter is a channel legend. I didn't even have to say that. Y'all all know Walter by now. And Walter says, Aloha, Enforcer, Enforcer Matt, and LSA from OG Ellison Bosun. A quote from Sun Tzu, Art of War. Not a direct quote, yet a good one. Quote unquote. In general whose army, citizens, and sovereign are united behind a clear justice and honorable justice is deemed to win the war. A general whose army has no clear definition and decisions are doomed to fail.
And I thank you so much for the mass amount of support, Walter A. Lakota. You've come in clutch tonight, and so thank you so much. And thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running. That support helps us out immensely and helps us to keep this channel running and help to keep alive. And so in that regard, thank you so much. Now, to get to the comment and address it, because honestly, that support, I was like, oh, thank God, because I was sitting here, I was like, oh no. But anyways, let's see. A general whose army, citizens, and sovereigns are united behind a clear justice, honorable justice, is deemed to win the war. That is true, and I think, well, I would actually have to disagree with that statement by Sun Tzu. Sometimes that's not true, because the Germans in the 40s were behind Hitler through and through. And I know that a lot of people like to go, oh, not really. They were. And if you go through history and look at it, the United States had to really turn a blind eye to a lot of ex-Nazis after the war because they were very important to maintaining Germany and keeping it running in post-war and occupation Germany. And so in that regard, it didn't really end up with them winning, but one thing that it did end up doing is seeing them almost conquering the entirety of continental Europe except for Russia. And so in that regard, I would say that is fairly true. Whether that determines victory or not, I would say is another thing based off of that instance, but still, it is a good point and definitely a great point when you look at allied nations like the United Kingdom, the United States, and so on in the Second World War, and even going into the First World War and wars beyond. A strong leader with a strong sense of direction and purpose can guide the nation to victory and make sure to keep their minds on the war and the best way to win it, and doing their part to help that happen. And so, with that, I would certainly agree on that statement, although I don't think it always leads to victory, just because of the German, I guess you could say, option. But a country that has no clear definition of what they're doing, they are bound to fail every single time. We can see that with wars like Afghanistan, where we went in there and we seemed to have a concept of what we were going to be doing in Afghanistan, but as the months turned into years, that concept just completely faded away, and then we just ended up being there for an indefinite amount of time, and we really had no idea what we were doing there anymore. And we would see that that would come back to bite us as the Afghan government would collapse within weeks, right when we started withdrawal. And so I would definitely agree with you, based off a historical context, that a country that is united against with a leader and has very strong goals and ambitions could certainly win a war, and it certainly helps out a load to achieve things that otherwise wouldn't be possible. And also countries that are not, that would largely be true too. It's very interesting speaking about Sun Tzu, because everyone always talks about Sun Tzu's Art of War, and I heard about that so much growing up as a kid that I was like, I eventually have to buy a copy of Sun Tzu's Art of War. I have to read it for myself. And then I read it, and it's so weird because it's talked about so much, but the level of detail that sometimes in the rules that Sun Tzu lays out are incredibly simple, like the high ground is better than the low ground. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, it's like you would know that. It's really interesting to me though, because the book lays out simple guidelines, but it's hailed as one of the best books on strategy out there. It's largely true. I mean, like, the rules are incredibly simple, but the rules stand true. They're nothing complicated. It's not like a modern U.S. Blue Book manual where it sits there and says, the average squad man has to have a pacing of 10 yards from one to the other, keeping the line of sight and making sure to move the squad along all together. The sergeant at the rear has to make sure that the spacing is intact and that eyesight is kept in between all units at the exact same time. We have to make sure that the machine gunner, it's not going into that level of detail, but it is going into enough detail to get the points across. And I would highly recommend, while it's a very simple book, and deceptively simple for the amount that people praise it, it is a very good book, and you can reap a lot of basic but very true information out of Sun Tzu's Art of War. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, the massive amount of support, Walter Lakota. You have helped us out greatly in keeping this channel running, and so with that, thank you so much once again. It means a whole load to us. And with that, we are on to the next one.
You're right. And real quick, to return to that poll that I put up about 5 minutes ago, the question is, in reference to war crimes, is just following orders a valid excuse in some instances? It looks like 68% said no, that is never valid, 9% said I'm not sure, and 22% said yes in some instances. Now, for this one, I'm going to fall within the minority, and that's probably going to shock some of you. I'm going to say yes in some instances, because it depends on the severity of the war crime committed and also the circumstances around it. It is extremely hard to refuse orders, especially in the military. The chain of command is a very, very, very strict structure. But for very atrocious things like torture, where they had an opportunity not to do it and rebel, I would say that is not a valid excuse. But nothing is absolute. It just depends on the details. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the justification of following orders is never valid. It's never a good excuse to commit the atrocities that these people commit. But at the same time, one has to remember that everyone follows orders. And I honestly, you look back through history, and you always wonder, how the hell do these people follow such atrocious orders? But you don't have to look far. You never have to look far to see instances all around the world where people follow atrocious orders and carry them through. For example, in China, and we're immediately about to get banned off YouTube, so we're going to skip China, although they have a million instances where they have followed orders and led to millions of people getting killed. Going over to Japan, however, in the Second World, and I don't even have to describe what the Japanese did in the Second World War. I'm sure that all of y'all know about the incident at Nanking, among many others in the Pacific War, that showed that Japanese would follow orders blindly. Really, their culture at the time, the Bushido Code, kind of encouraged that kind of savagery to a point that they would inflict on others, like the Koreans, the Chinese, and also the islanders in the Pacific. You can also see in North Korea that people will blindly follow orders. It's almost unheard of. In fact, it's so rare for people in North Korea, not to follow orders, that they almost get their own television segment made about them if they ever defect. It's against human nature, for the most part, to not, to refuse to follow orders. You can see that even in U.S. history, with the internment camps, where we threw Japanese Americans, who were full-blooded Americans at the time, into concentration camps. Well, not concentration camps, that's a little bit too strong. Internment camps. You can also see that whenever laws are passed in America, because one thing that you always hear, this is always the funniest thing to me here in the United States, is to hear people act like they have a spine. And this is something you'll see on all sides, because one side will be saying, I'm going to pass a law, and it's a very contentious law. It's something that everyone in the United States is always talking up and down about, whether it be gun control or something, or abortion. And then you'll hear people go, whenever it's brought up, oh, if they pass that law, I'm just going to outright do what I want. And, that's a little bit ironic to me, because then you'll walk in there the next month or year, and the law that they were talking about they were going to outright refuse to follow has been passed, and then they go, well, the law says this, so I'm going to do what the law says. And that's just what people do. People follow orders all over, but just because it's the norm to follow orders doesn't make them any more acceptable to follow through with them and do them. And if you are found to have done something like that, you got to be held accountable for it. And so with that, I hope that addresses the poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
Right. So now moving back to our super chat questions. And also, real quick, I see a lot of folks saying that unlawful orders do not have to be followed. And on paper, that is the case. But like everything, in reality, it's a whole lot different. Because if you go and try to refuse an order, there's no telling, especially if you're in a war, what's going to happen to you. You could get shot for treason. That's a potential risk of refusing an order. I don't know. Enforcer, what do you think about that?
On paper, and in the conventions of war and the rules of war and every other article that's ever been written, the Geneva Convention, so on, there's always a clause in there that says an unlawful order should not be followed, and it is your duty to make sure not to follow through with them. But if you're in, let's say Iraq, and you think that village in the distance is a little bit of a nuisance, and there's guys out there, radio man, call in an airstrike on that village. But sir, there's civilians in there. We haven't been. You listen, man. I'm about to bash your head in with a shovel. Either you call in that airstrike, or I bash your head in with a shovel. This is squad Alpha 72, and then they used to call in the airstrike. That's what happens in real life. It's always great to hear the idea of not following through on a lawful order, an unlawful order. But in reality, it's almost impossible not to follow through on it because people get scared for their own lives. Like in North Korea, for example. You really think that some people in North Korea want to be torturing other citizens? Probably not, but they're scared for their lives about what will happen to them if they don't torture those people. So then it doesn't really become about doing the right thing. It becomes a necessity of survival to do these heinous things, so that way hopefully they can live to see the next day, while the guy that they inflicted that stuff onto may not. And so I do see what y'all are saying, and that's on paper, but reality is always a lot more difficult than what we lay out on paper. You can see that in an everyday basis here in America. And so with that, we are on to the next one. I hope that addresses that fairly well.
All right, so moving on to our next one, we have a $20 super chat once more from Super Bonker 9000, the NAFO member, who says LSA rocks.
And thank you so much once again for the support. And thank you so much for saying the Lee Spring Army rocks. I think the Lee Spring Army is one of the best things on YouTube. Of course, I'm a little biased, but even if you're not biased, I think you can see that. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And thank you so much for enjoying being a member of the Lee Spring Army and also giving a huge shout out to him as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support. It helps this channel to keep on running. And without viewer support, we wouldn't be able to do this. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat from Mikhail Fredrickson, who says, take a question from the chat, please.
And we will make sure to do that. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running while I sit there and say this 60 times, because for some reason I come up with a new saying and then I use it until the wheels come off. But seriously, thank you so much. And so with that, let's get a live chat.
And the live chat question goes to Magic Skygirl, who is also a channel legend, who says, Enforcer, when you gonna apply for that YouTube plaque? Do you need some help? And that's a good question.
And that's a great question, Magic Skygirl. I've tried to apply for the plaque before, but the code they gave me, whenever I tried to input it, they said it was an invalid code that did not work. And so I don't know if that's YouTube's way of telling us we're not getting a plaque or not, but we will probably be trying to get it soon if we can. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Magic Skygirl. You're always here every single night. I hope you enjoyed this stream as much as any other. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I hope we address that live chat fairly well. And thank you so much once again for sponsoring that live chat. And with that, on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat once more from Walter A. Lakota Jr., that channel legend. He says, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, it's about meddling in decisions while at war. And he's talking about the Sun Tzu quote he gave earlier.
Oh, I thought you meant it was really just about the esprit de corps of a nation. And in that regard, about meddling decisions while at war. I would agree with that. If you're talking about the Russians kind of like changing their decisions and strategies as the war goes on, and changing the outset of their original decision, I would certainly agree with that, because we've seen that that's led them into what appears to be a never-ending war on their end, with a massive amount of casualties, taking a massive economic hit on them. And so in that regard, I would certainly have to agree that in terms of meddling in their own decisions, it's certainly going to lead to their defeat. And I can't really think of a historical incident where it didn't. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Walter. Of course, you've helped out this channel massively. I can't believe you sent in a second super chat after that monolith of a first one. But still, thank you so much once again, because every little bit of support counts and helps us to keep this thing going. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Psyops, who is now one of our mods, by the way. Psyops says, "Dear Canada, while we appreciate the cold you have sent us, we ordered it in July. Next time we will be forced to refuse delivery. Sincerely, the United States of Oklahoma. Texas stinks."
Thanks. But I thank you so much for the support, Psyops. And also, I would have to agree, Canada, send the cold a little bit earlier. You don't understand how hot it gets down here in Alabama. It gets around 106 degrees. Do you know how hot that is? That's hot enough to cook grease. And I don't even know why I'm trying to pull off that voice, Bruce. For some reason, I can do it perfectly fine off stream, but when I get on stream, I can't. I don't know why. Because a lot of people, whenever I do this voice, like this, which is based off of, I can't even do it right then. I don't know why, because I do it perfectly off stream. I think it's because I have headphones on. I can't really hear myself doing it that well. But every time I do it off stream, I do it great. It's supposed to be like an imitation of George Costanza's dad on Seinfeld, because I find that to be like the funniest accent ever. But I can't ever do it right. But yeah, don't send the cold down now. Send it down earlier. It gets like 100 degrees down here in the south in July. And so a little bit of cold weather would be greatly appreciated. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Psyops, and also the general notice to Canada that we will not accept delivery of the cold weather next time. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support, Psyops, and helping us to keep this thing going.
Right, and also it looks like returning to our old format of reporting more detailed on the map and the news is very popular with the chat, because they're talking about it a whole bunch. So I'm glad to see that is the case. And me personally, I'm glad we're returning to it, because I miss like seeing all the details on the ground in Ukraine. And me and the Enforcer were talking about that earlier. So I'm very happy with that change. And up next, to move on to our next super chat, we have a $10 donation from E3ECO, who says, "Bayraktar. Bayraktar."
Bayraktar. I'm about to sing the whole song. Anyways, I thank you so much once again for the support. And also, I thank you so much for once again pointing out one of Ukraine's most famous weapons in this war, Bayraktar. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Spencer, who says, "Since you have to say whatever is sent in the super chats, say Baba Bowie and answer a question from the live chat."
Read that one again real quick.
He says, "Since you have to say whatever is sent in super chats, say Baba Bowie and answer a question from the live chat."
Baba Bowie. And let's get to the
Baba Bowie.
Baba Boy. Where is that from, Mandy? I forgot where that specific thing is from.
From Spencer?
Well, who's Spencer?
A viewer.
No. I'm talking about where Baba Boy, the phrase, comes from.
I honestly don't know. I've heard, let's see, I don't want to say it. I've heard the Orange Man say it. I'm not sure exactly what it means, though.
I think I've heard a crazy guy say it. It's not the guy you're talking about. It's some like crazy guy. Like he was like, I'm a child of society. I think he was the one who originally said it.
Somebody said the Howard Stern show.
Oh, Howard Stern. Yeah, Howard Stern. He also does something like we do. I haven't really heard of him. Here he's up and coming. I'm just kidding. Don't be like, you're an idiot. Yeah, I know who he is. But anyways, Baba Boy. And let's get to that live chat.
All right. So the live chat goes to, and also, of course, sponsored by Spencer. He says, let's see. Bill Russell says nothing about the USS Gerald Ford arriving in the UK with NATO warships, ?
Was there nothing about it? Welcome aboard the USS Badass. That is the cringiest title
That's
I've ever
cringy
seen.
as hell. The Times. I've never even heard of the Times.
On a choppy day. Wait, hang on. On a choppy day out in the Solent, there's a mighty wind blowing off the Hampshire coast, and yet everything is perfectly still on board the largest warship the world has ever seen. The nuclear-powered USS Gerald R. Ford has dropped anchor in Portsmouth on its first delivery of overseas deployment like Amazon Prime. Where the hell did I even get delivery? And it feels like it's been in the elements to its will. No need for sea legs here. The lead ship...
Something tells me that George Grills is a tactical guy.
Something tells me that this is the kind of guy to have all of that combat gear, you know, like the bulletproof vest, the helmet, you know, the silly paratrooper helmet that has the open sides. You know, everything's all black. He's probably got like a laser on his gun, you know, and an ACOG and
balaclava.
Yeah, balaclava, probably a vertical foregrip. You know, he's got you know, I mean, you can go on and on about the tactical people. Honestly, I find it to be a little cringe, you know, because, you know, are you ever really going to do anything that you say you're going to do? Probably not. But anyways, yeah, this guy is writing, you know, a little cringe. Also, that title is cringe.
That's badass.
Walk with your, walk with your boys.
Wait a minute. Walk with your boys.
You can't even do it. We're smiling and laughing so hard about it. Let's see here. What else do we got on this one? Look inside the USS Gerald R. Ford. Let's see here. What do we got here? On the news. Where do you get your news from? I get it from the news. Oh, dang it. We have to pay. Okay, we're getting off of that one. How about
they want to give us a gift card.
How about Forces.net? Oh my god. Do all of them make us pay? Oh man, hang on. Let me back out of this one. Let's go to Independent. Let's see if we can get on Independent. The USS Gerald R. Ford, also known as the biggest badass warship in the world, is moored off the southern coast of England. Footage shows...
Who the hell gave it that name? Somebody apparently in the military gave it that name. That was a terrible idea.
That was a stupid name. You know, you could have named this thing a whole bunch of funnier and more accurate things, like the USS tripping downstairs or something, you know, something relevant to Gerald R. Ford. Instead, they sit there and call it the biggest badass. That's like the cringiest thing I've ever heard anything in the modern world called. Like, you could come up with anything
Cringe
better.
fest out of Gerald R. Ford.
Jeez. And this seems like the coolest aircraft carrier that the U.S. has ever built. I mean, if you look at it technologically, coolest thing ever. It's the biggest one ever, too. And we give it a stupid nickname. Like, who came up with that? I'm really just blown away with that. But with that, anyways, I thank you so much for the support. It did arrive in Portsmouth today. I don't really think that's associated much with the goings-on with Russia and Ukraine. It may just be part of a normal fleet movement, but still pretty interesting to see. And also, I hate the nickname on that thing. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Oats Air, who says, do you think we'll see Ukrainians and Russians have a Christmas truce like the one along the Western Front in 1914, Slava LSA and Slava Ukraine?
I don't think we will, because that Christmas truce was had only in between the British and the Germans, and the British, at that point in the war, didn't really understand why they were there, because culturally, the Germans and the British are a lot more similar than the British are to the French. And so the Germans and the British, also due to royal lineages at the time, Kaiser Wilhelm II was actually one of the, man, he was a relative, I forgot the exact relative, of Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria's nurse actually delivered Wilhelm II when he was born, which shows you how closely related European royalty was at the time. And so they found much more of a connection in between themselves and the Germans than they did with the French. And so they had a Christmas truce because there was a little bit of camaraderie there. And also the British didn't have the same kind of animosity that the French did after the Franco-Prussian War of 1877. But that was the only reason it happened. It didn't happen in between the French and the Germans. And considering that the Ukrainians and the Russians have loads of reasons to have animosity in between each other in this current war, I don't think we'll be having any kind of Christmas truce here in this war. I feel like the Christmas will just come by and then be over with, and there will be no truce, and it won't even be eventful in terms of the happenings of the time. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Bob H., who says, I saw a video on YouTube that showed the Hawk being reloaded by that little tracked vehicle, Slav Ukraine. Also, Turkey still uses the XXI version.
And thank you so much for the support. And also, the little tracked vehicle is kind of funny. It kind of reminds me of a Goliath bomb from the Second World War. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting little piece of kit. I don't really like them, though, and I think they're incredibly outdated. Turkey probably does use them because, you know, Turkey is Turkey. I don't really know how to explain Turkey, to be honest with you all. Turkey is something to me that's just aggravating because you can't make rhyme or reason out of them. But yes, they do use those. And they also use M60 still, which are a very old American tank. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin. Let's see. Enforcer, I think you unhid somebody.
I did. And I was looking at it, I was like, I think that was a joke, so
okay, that was intentional. Okay, I was making sure it wasn't an accident, because I just took out a bot just a second ago.
Well, also I like, because this is something that's funny to me, is that...
Don't address him. Resist, Enforcer, resist.
Well, you know,
resist.
Well, that guy's been around for like, what, a month? You know?
No, he hasn't. That's a bot.
Oh, I thought that guy had been around. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so we do have that $10 super chat from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who says, the orcs will become frozen fertilizer soon. Cold face, cold face.
Chilly. With that, I thank you so much for the support. And they will be very cold. I don't think that they'll be turning into frozen fertilizer. I think they're going to be in the cold cut section. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Rick R., who says, where and who is your source? That is telling you that the Ukraine soldiers are, quote-unquote, ready for winter. There are several ex-U.S. SOF members coming back from humanitarian missions saying otherwise.
My source is the video and picture evidence where we see Ukrainian soldiers bundled up in winter gear in every single video. So that's my evidence. The SOF guys can come back and say whatever they want, but the videos speak for themselves. It's much like Wally, who came back and said, the Ukrainians don't know what they're doing in the first month and a half of the war, and then 8.5 months later, they're retaking ground from the Russians like it's the Second World War and it's the later end of it. So, you know, I don't mean to disagree with these SOF people, but they can say whatever they want. But the video picture evidence is showing a completely different story. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Lunkus. And Lunkus does not leave a comment. But thank you very much for that $10 support. It does help keep the channel running. And with the viewers like you, PBS and the Enforcer channel can keep running.
And thank you so much. Right. And thank you so much once again for the support. And that was funny, Matthew. I gave that bot a second chance, you know, and then they immediately abused it. I was like, maybe they were just kidding around, but nope, they didn't. Anyways, with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope we addressed that comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Vance Hicks, who says, Enforcer, it seems that hard frozen ground is conducive tank warfare. Do we have hard figures on what percentage of Russian MBTs are out of the game at this point?
around 70% to 60% of Russian main battle tanks pre-war numbers have been knocked out. We don't have a current count on how many Russian tanks are in operation now that they've started to revitalize their T-62Ms, so we don't have an exact number, but based off the pre-war figures, around 60 to 70% of their original tank force has been completely wiped out and destroyed by Ukrainian anti-tank fire. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and you are absolutely correct. Cold ground will help for the units to move a whole lot, especially compared to the Rasputitsa season. However, considering that Russian supply lines will be extremely stretched due to the cold weather and probably won't be able to function well at all, the possibility of Russian vehicles getting enough gas and fuel to continue to run in the winter weather is highly unlikely. So while that's true, I think that the supply line situation will certainly ensure that the Russian armored units aren't able to make any kind of resurgence due to the ground freezing over. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support and a pretty good question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Tiago Andrade, who says, "Hey, enforcers, yesterday was my birthday. Yeehaw! I missed the stream. Could you please do a summary of the main news? Love you guys, and Slava Ukraine. And also, happy late birthday to you as well."
And happy late birthday to you as well. I hate that you weren't here. We would have given you a birthday shout out. And to give you a quick rundown on the news yesterday, we showed Dave Chappelle on stream, so it got blocked. I'm sorry about that. That's the reason why there is no stream yesterday, is because we ran one. Dave Chappelle was on it on Saturday Night Live, and Saturday Night Live blocked it. But anyways, what happened yesterday is that the Ukrainian front lines were largely stagnant, as usual. The Russians appear to have been retiring from the front line in the Bakhmut region, and beyond that, there wasn't really anything too eventful. Also, the Russians were targeting Ukrainian electrical infrastructure, again with cruise missiles, but beyond that, those were really the major points of yesterday's news. There wasn't, like, while we cover a lot of news, by and large, sometimes the days are somewhat uneventful. I would consider yesterday a somewhat uneventful day in terms of what was really going on. Today, I would really, to be honest, put it under a similar umbrella. We see that things are moving towards being eventful again, but right now it's kind of the, I guess you could say, the halftime show in between the plays. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And happy birthday again. I hate that you weren't here. We would have given you a birthday shout out on your birthday, but I guess the day after still counts. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. Happy birthday again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Lee G, who says, "Fell asleep before I saw my call out last night, and then found the vid was blocked. Anyways, keep up the good work from Great Bar, Birmingham, UK."
Oh, dang it. I'm sorry about that. We actually did look at Great Bar in Birmingham, and I hate that it was blocked because I just remember that some people get off before their super chats are read, and so some of y'all didn't even get to see y'all super chats get read off on stream because it was blocked. So I'm sorry about that.
Thanks, SNL. It was fair use anyway.
Yeah, thanks,
your lawyer should know that.
Thanks, SNL, for being a bunch of assholes. We didn't even show their whole clip. We didn't show the whole episode. It was used under fair use. It all fell under Title 17. I would go and argue it, but SNL is not going to take it. YouTube's going to be like, "Oh, I'm sorry," because, you know, YouTube acts like they're fair until we go up against a bigger channel, and then they always side with a bigger channel, and SNL is a bigger one on YouTube, so they'll just side with them and say, "Nothing's wrong with that." So we really have no choice. But we will go back and look at the Great Bar again, because it's a great bar. I mean, like, if y'all have never been to this bar, I'd highly recommend it. The drinks are good, the food's good, and now Google Maps has decided to freeze. Are you there, Matthew?
Yes.
Totoro? We're going to have to pull up the Great Bar like this. Not the Great Barrier Reef, Han. The Great Bar. And also, just in case if you disagree with me earlier, because I saw some people saying, "You're butthurt, SNL's good." SNL sucks. I've never seen anything good come out of SNL in a long time. Maybe they have maybe one good skit out of like 300 hours of content. I give them credit for the speed at which they can pump out bullcrap, but beyond that, it's a crappy show. But anyway,
I've heard that working on SNL is pretty nasty too. A lot of fights, a lot of like scheming and bad stuff going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's just it's terrible. It's a terrible show all around. It's terrible to work on it. It's terrible to like the skits are terrible. I mean, like, I don't like it. Anyways, we did look at this yesterday, and I gotta say the Great Bar is pretty. I love how much like shrubbery is all over the place. Like the front yards here are kept up incredibly well. And also, of course, in the typical British fashion, the cars look so nice, but the houses by American standards are so small. It's the weirdest thing in America because usually the cars are the last thing that people buy in America. But but the cars are like the first thing that people buy in Britain. Like you'll see like a house that's somewhat small, like 1,200 square feet. You know, and in American standards, it's incredibly small. The average house over here is 2,500 square feet. But you'll see a Bentley out in front of it. Like, it's the weirdest thing. Like, right here, for example. Let me move down this road. Oh, dang it, the car's gone. Okay. Well, I didn't get to take a look at that car, sadly. Cry me a river. But anyways, I do like the Great Bar. It looks like a neat place. And what's interesting about it is that I've always, when I went to Britain, people were like, avoid Birmingham. You're going to get stabbed. But every time I look at Birmingham, it looks like a nice place. It looks better than our Birmingham. Anyways, with that, I think
yeah, they say it's bad according to English standards, but you haven't seen the United States yet.
Yeah, I mean the U.S. version, and I know we have Birmingham viewers in here. Listen, I know that y'all may like the town, and I came from.
It's down. We're talking about downtown, by the way. We're specifically talking about downtown Birmingham.
And I'm not, and you know, and there's a lot of nice places in Birmingham. Don't get me wrong. And also, we come from Montgomery, Alabama. I'm not going to get into specifics of where, but that's where we actually were born and raised. And Montgomery is by far a lot worse than Birmingham. I would say it's like I don't even know what to describe it like. It's a pretty wild place now. They don't even really have cops down there anymore. It's anarchy down there. It's like Dodge City. But Birmingham is a nice place, beautiful place. Homewood's a nice place. Vestavia Hills is a great place. Mountain Brook's a great place. Bessemer is a little questionable, but there's some really neat places around Bessemer. Hoover's nice, of course. Everywhere's nice. I mean, like Indian Springs, Pelham's not really, I call it part of the greater Birmingham area, but Pelham's Pelham. It's still nice though. But downtown Birmingham is horrendous. People at college, like I go to college down in Birmingham. Like, you know, of course y'all know that because y'all have seen my search bar and it shows the college I go to. I'm not going to say it out loud, but people are scared at that college to go to classes late at night because you walk out of the building and there's just like people around and they look like they're going to rob you. I mean, like, you know, I'm not trying to make it sound terrible or anything, but you know, downtown Birmingham is a pretty rough place. You know, definitely, certainly in some parts of it more so than others. But you know, I gotta say, Birmingham in England actually looks like a place I'd visit. It doesn't look bad at all. It looks a lot better than our downtown. So maybe next time we ever go over there, if we ever do again, we'll go to Birmingham and take a look at it. Maybe by then the high-speed 2 will be built so we can go straight from London to Birmingham in like an hour.
Oh, I gotta call this one out real quick. Bilbo Jenkins said the state sound of Alabama is a gunshot.
It's the sound of a gunshot, and then it's the song Dixie. So, you know, you hear yes. And you know, it's not got the original lyrics to the song. It's all about cousins and stuff. Alabama's an interest. I love Alabama. I make so many jokes about Alabama, but Alabama is truly a wonderful place. Travel the entire country, and never can you find a group of people as nice as the folks in Alabama. And while we don't have the shining beauty of a city like, I don't know. I mean, I can't really think of any. Well, really, I mean, like,
but Enforcer, go back down to Alabama real quick. Y'all see out of this entire state, there's only 2 places in it that I think are actually nice. It's going to be Huntsville at the very top and Birmingham right in the middle. And I'm talking about the surrounding areas of Birmingham are pretty nice. But rather than that, the entire state is either rural or the cities are not that great, in my opinion.
Honestly though, like I'm going to give a huge shout out to the rural places. The rural places are not as up to date as other places in Alabama or the rest of the United States, but the people there are incredibly nice, and I love Alabamian people. Alabamian people are the people I grew up around. They're incredibly nice. I would count on Alabamians any day for anything. It's just that sometimes some places in our state are a little bit dangerous or falling behind, and hopefully one day when you get around to fixing those problems, you know, because they're problems that do need to be addressed and fixed eventually. But with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well. And anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for the support and allowing us to take a look at the Great Bar in Birmingham, England, and not Birmingham, Alabama. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from John D, who says, thanks as always for the hard work. Who are your favorite comedians, guys? P.S. Lauren Michaels probably has weird old man farts. My best, John. So, John, real quick, I would say my favorite comedian is probably going to be either Dave Chappelle, and that's kind of ironic because we just showed a clip of him yesterday,
And then get copyrighted for it. Yeah.
yes, or it would be one of the guys from Seinfeld. Kramer got in a little trouble a while back for something he said, but before that,
that's an understatement. He got in a lot of trouble.
But before that, I would say that Kramer is one of the funniest guys on Seinfeld, and I'd probably say he's pretty funny as a comedian before the little schism, and then he went really downhill after the schism happened. But Enforcer, how about you?
I would say my favorite comedians, of course, Dave Chappelle is a pretty funny guy. Also, I find Bill Burr to be funny sometimes. Sometimes his new material isn't the best. I still get a good laugh out of it. But Bill Burr can kind of be a hit or miss. Hopefully Bill Burr doesn't see this because Bill Burr is pretty good at roasting the hell out of people, and I'm sure I get roasted. But I like Bill Burr. Bill Burr's a pretty good one. Dave Chappelle's a pretty good one. Getting back into some oldies, I really like. I know that George Carlin's known for his later times. You know, like when he was out there saying some really strong things. But I find the George Carlin pre-1985 to be incredibly hilarious because his comedy wasn't really politically charged, and you all know I'm not really a big fan of politics. At least, having politics as a form of my entertainment. And back then, he didn't really throw a lot of it in. It was just funny stuff like, what's time? Or why do people use certain phrases and stuff. I honestly found those bits to be incredibly hilarious. And then the last, but maybe the bottom one on the list for me, in terms of the funniest ones, is... I'm trying to think. What? Hang, I just lost your name, actually. I don't think I can answer that one because I completely forgot who it was. Also, someone said Rowan Atkinson, who is Mr. Bean. Mr. Bean is funny. I haven't seen enough of his content, though, to really, get around him a lot and like him. But really, I guess...
Somebody said Bill Burr. Bill is funny at times, but to be honest with you, his attitude, kind of like Jerry Seinfeld, the guy is really crass and, honestly, there's no other way to say it. He's an asshole in real life.
Well, Matthew, I just said I like Bill Burr.
To me, he seems like he's got a really bad attitude, and some of that comes out funny, but that's really the way he is.
I kind of find it funny at times. I can enjoy watching it on a stage. I don't know if I could hang out around someone like that. But, it is what it is. Anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that question fairly well, John. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Classified Veteran, who says, I trained for winter combat in 10th Mountain. The hardest thing is hygiene. You actually can get your clothes dirtier in the winter than in the summer.
And thank you so much for the support. And I would actually say that that's something new to me. You would think that clothes would get a lot dirtier in the summer, not in the winter, because in the winter, you're just dealing... Well, no, actually, I could see that. I could see that now. Because you got the mud, you've got the slush of snow, you're probably sweating under all those hot clothes, so then the clothes get really sweaty. So I could actually see that. That does seem like it would make sense to me now. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support and sharing that information with us. And that is actually interesting to hear that you get dirtier in the winter than you do in the summer. But with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for a really interesting little tidbit of information.
Yes, indeed. And up next, I want to give a shout out to Dupper Bob and Gilliman X for putting in a $2 donation each. And thank you both very much for that support. We also have a $5 super chat from Cameron K, who says, was walking my Aussie. Did super chat rules change or I mishear? I'm 1 block from where the internment camp at Santa Anita, California was. I'm next to Arbitorium.
And thank you for the support. Super chat rules have not changed, but that is pretty interesting to hear. Where is that exact place again, Matthew?
Santa Anita, California.
Santa Anita, California. Dang, I'm sure it doesn't exist anymore. This place has really been built out. Golly, I don't know why. Los Angeles scares the hell out of me because it seems like once you get in that city, you'd never be able to get out of it just because of its size, and how poorly everything works because the mountains, there's only a couple of ways out of the city. And then one just goes directly into the next city, San Bernardino. I gotta be honest with you. Los Angeles just scares the hell out of me. I'm sure it's a nice place. And you know, it's got its ups and downs like every other place, but man, I mean, like, it's just so freaking crowded. Oh my god, it's like there's parks and stuff, but oh man, I don't know if I could live like that. You know, like, I'm sure it's nice though, but like being that crowded, oh lord. But let's see here. I can't find where that internment camp would be. I guess it just doesn't exist anymore. There's a Dave and Buster's probably where it was at one point, and that's pretty wild to hear. That's something that is a little bit interesting to me in American history, is that we threw a whole bunch of Japanese Americans. I mean, like, they were not even really Japanese Americans, they were just Americans, but they had Japanese heritage, into camps at the beginning of the war because we were scared that they were going to ally with the Japanese. Although a lot of them would end up joining the military. So, you know, kind of weird to me that we did that. You know, and of course, you know, whenever you say anything like that, you got one group that wants to deny that it ever happened or anything and move on, and then you got one group that wants to whip the backs of everyone in the United States and make them feel guilty for it. It was a thing that happened, a little unfortunate, live and learn. But with that, I thank you so much for the support and sharing that with us, and that's really cool to hear that you're that close to something that we were just talking about. But with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right. And for the final super chat of the night, until we get to our live chat questions, we have a $2 donation from Marco Chavan, who says, MEPS is declaring Russia a terrorist state tomorrow. And Marco, you're talking about a different MEPS than I'm thinking about, because the MEPS I know is the entrance processing station for the military.
Sir, can you piss in this cup? By the way, a little secret, Russia's going to be declared a terrorist state. And thank you for the piss in the cup, sir. Move on to the next room where we're going to check you for scoliosis. But anyways,
you got the whole wrong tone for the way the MEPS people talk.
Well, how do they talk?
Get your ass over here.
They don't talk like that in MEPS because they're still trying to wait for you to sign that contract.
No, they definitely talk rough at MEPS.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't. No, they don't. We've had friends go through MEPS. One of my friends is right now in Space Force Basic, and he didn't get talked like that in MEPS. He said they were really nice.
Well,
Matthew, you just a liar. I'm just kidding. But anyways, with that, it's pretty nice to hear that people are starting to step up. Organizations are, and they're starting to declare Russia a terrorist state. I feel like we're behind the curve on that, though, as the United States. I feel like we should go ahead and do that. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so up next, we have one more super chat to get to, and it's a $10 super chat from Blue Flam 777, the channel legend as well. And I don't know what has gotten into Blue Flam. He's putting in animal noises for some reason.
Wait.
Is this Duncan?
Before you read Blue Flams, Matthew, Fritz S just said the thing that everyone fears at MEPS. Bend over and spread your butt cheeks.
Oh, yes, that's quite bad.
That scares the hell out of everyone when going to MEPS. Like, everyone would be at school, and they'd be like, man, did you go to MEPS? Yeah. Did they make you do that? Yeah, man. They made you
duck walk.
Yeah, they made you duck walk, too. And it's like, oh, no. You know, like it just freaked Aaron out for some reason. But anyways, let's get to Blue Flam.
All right, so Blue Flam says, oink, oink, meow. Fishy stink. Spiders don't, let's see. I have a feeling there's something meant behind that, but it might just be my brain. But unless Baba Moo Slava Ukraine Badger, bite me now. Question goes to the chat.
And thank you for the support, Blue Flam 777. It's interesting to see that you're now picking up Duncan VR characteristics. Is this going to become contagious? Do we need to quarantine Duncan? But with that, thank you so much once again. And we're now going to take that question from the live chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the question from the live chat, and excuse me, the coughing thing's coming back again. I don't know what's causing it. The question goes to Sean Stewart, who says, will the snowfall affect drones? Can they fly while snowing?
Can snowfall affect drones? I feel like it can, to be honest with you. It is precipitation, and I'm assuming that if some of the drone parts are warm, like the battery or the motors, it could melt that down into water, and that could start to affect the longevity of the drone, or maybe even take it out. So I feel like it probably would affect it. But with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. Once again, take that with a grain of salt because we're working off of minimal knowledge here. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for a really interesting question that, to be honest with you, I don't think I'm qualified to answer. But with that, on to the next one.
Right. And also, we have one more super chat, this time from Cameron K, who puts in a $10 donation. And Cameron says, found out Putin pays for Iranian state-of-the-art weapons by sending the, are you reading the super chat?
Let's see. Found out Putin pays for Iranian state-of-the-art weapons by sending the egg of Russian men to Iranian. Oh. It's why so-and-so like fighting tyranny, but the Russian men flee. LOL. I don't know if we can read that middle part. I think we'd have to censor that, and we did in a way. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. And just in case you all haven't heard, Iran is popping off down there. Literally, when the Revolutionary Guard is firing at people, and people are beating the Revolutionary Guard to death right now. So, we might try and cover that news. In fact, we were talking about running a midday stream tomorrow because while I'm exhausted, the wheels are going to fall off this bus, baby. And we were thinking about running a midday stream tomorrow to maybe talk about some of that stuff and also have a bit of a fireside chat. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. It's some pretty interesting commentary. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. So moving on to our live chat questions, we are finally there. We have a question from Justin Apps, who says, have you seen the new F-35?
I have seen the F-35. I've not seen the new F-35. The new F-35. Wow, that
new F-350. That's sick.
That is sick. Let's see here. The new one. Let's go to Lockheed Martin's website. The centerpiece of 21st century global security. The F-35 strengthens national security, enhances global partnerships, and powers economic growth. As the most lethal, survivable, and connected fighter jet in the world, the F-35 gives pilots the critical advantage against any adversary, enabling them to execute their mission and come home safe.
Wait a minute. They said promotes economic growth.
Yeah, because, you know,
Excuse me?
The F-35 is a moneymaker. You can hook that thing up to a Bitcoin mine and make a killing.
Did they just admit, like, basically to, like, the whole military-industrial complex? Like, it only benefits the military companies. It really doesn't benefit the countries economically, does it?
Oh, yeah, it does. I mean, like, hell, like, if someone buys an F-35 from the United States, man, you know how many people that employs in fulfilling that contract? Like, a load. That's how the United States makes a decent amount of money. You know, well, at least the defense industry. And that helps us to fund the development of these weapons that are leaps and bounds, decades above really what anyone else can make.
Huh.
Yeah, so, I mean, you know...
Kind of weird to put that in your advertising.
Well, I mean, you know, it's an industry. It's there to... for someone to make money, you know, like what, like I find it a little bit weirder, to be honest with you, if it was like a non-profit, like every bit of money that you use on the F-35 will be going to feeding children. You know, it's like that would seem a little bit weird. I find it to just be more so accurate for it to be explained like a business. But that is kind of weird. Enhances global partnerships. Like that is a little bit weird too.
Like I'm kind of surprised. I'm kind of surprised they wrote that. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it is kind of weird. But let's see what else they got. Oh, look at that. I don't understand.
Oh, look, it's got laser beams.
It's got the laser beams. I don't know why they always have cheap 3D renderings. Like, you know, they have all the money in the world, Lockheed Martin and companies like them do, yet the 3D renderings are always so cheap looking. I don't understand. Anyways, strengthening the global coalition.
So this isn't really new. It's just the F-35 that's been out.
I believe so. I'm not really seeing anything new about it. Also, look, there's the M61 Gatling gun that the F-35 has. You can actually see it right there, which is pretty cool.
I appreciate how clean they keep their like production facility.
Yeah, it's a really clean place. I mean, it has to be clean. It has to almost be sterile to build these things. But let's see if I can scroll up here and global enterprise. What about that? 3 U.S. services and 14 international allies. Wow, by God.
Wait a minute, they said 3 U.S. services and they put Navy and Marine Corps in the same group.
Yeah, because the Marine Corps is a department of the Navy.
And then they had Marine Corps up there on another jet.
Oh yeah, well that's just goofy. I didn't realize
Come
that.
on now, what in the world? It's like, oh, where's the army at?
And also after
the army
counting
doesn't have planes, by the way.
Also counting the 3 U.S. services, they say 14 international allies, but the United States is one of them. They're padding the numbers here, people. They're padding the numbers. They need to fix this. If you're working for Lockheed Martin right now, you need to get with your marketing department and tell them to change what's on the website because it's a little messed up. But
I don't even know why they have a marketing department to begin with. If a country wants the jet, they're going to call up the company. It's not like you're going to go in here and browse like you're shopping on Amazon or something.
You wouldn't believe it, Matthew, but people like Millie in other countries are browsing the internet, also becoming rogue, doing whatever they want regardless of who's in charge, and also browsing the internet for weapons. This is kind of believe it or not, people in the military actually browse websites like this and look at this stuff, or they go to weapons expos. It's really
weapons
bizarre.
expos.
Yeah, like weapons expos where, they buy a little, they rent out an auditorium and then they set up a tank or a plane in there or something. But, I mean, hell, it's kind of bizarre to go to their website. I can't find anything new about the F-35. It looks like just the normal F-35. I'm sure it's the 3 variants, the A, B, and C models. But I can't find anything new about them. But with that, I thank you so much for the question. I hope that addresses that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we do have another super chat. First up, we have a $2 donation from Homer Lapguard, who does not leave a comment. But Homer, thank you very much for that support and also being a longtime channel viewer. He has been around for quite some time, and we do appreciate it. We also have a $10 super chat from Kilo Charlie, who says, Dudley Moore impression, please.
I don't know who Dudley Moore is, though. I've never heard him. And I would play a clip to listen to him, but I'm scared. I'm scared that I'm going to get in trouble for playing it. So, sadly, I don't think I can do that one. Because I don't even know what he would sound like. So, it would be the worst impression ever. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. I'm sorry I can't do it. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and now we have a live chat question from Oats Air, who says, did you know that Finland bought 64 F-35s a year or so back and should be getting the first shipment of 8 this coming February in 2023?
I actually didn't know that, and that is pretty cool to hear. One thing that's interesting to me is that a lot of countries had very large orders, and that is a big order. 64 F-35s is massive, and I'm feeling that they'll probably downscale that order, much like the British downscaled theirs. But that is pretty wild to hear, and hopefully they will get them soon. So with that, thank you so much for the information notes there. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have another super chat from Cameron K, who puts in a $5 donation this time. And says, has the Peace Corps said if/announced when they'll go to Ukraine? This was the price for half a gallon of gas in my area, LOL.
Oh my God, where do you live?
So it's $10 for gas a gallon?
Price of
That's California,
gas
it's got to be.
nationwide. Let's see here. State gas price averages. Let's go through here.
Santa Anita, California's got some bad gas prices, then.
Yeah, baby, $3.26 a gallon. Let's see here. Let's scroll down though. We need to find the price. Oh wait a minute, we can actually arrange it on what's most expensive and least expensive. So, California, of course, looks like they have the highest price in every regard, and they do. Funnily enough, I have a friend who lives in California. And he says it's practically impossible to afford to survive out there because everything is so expensive. And I don't know if that's true or not. I feel like it's true for probably some out there, probably not for others. But I can't.
It's true, because I have a friend that's from California as well, and he hated it, and he moved, his whole family.
I got to say this. California makes everything so expensive. I mean, and some people say, oh, it's because so many people want to live out there. No. They make it that expensive. Like, the state of California goes out of their way to make things incredibly expensive. And it's just, it's impossible to think that a state would make it so inhospitable to survive in there just because of the price of average items and goods that you need to get about daily life. And, you can go down the rabbit hole there, but, California is neat. It looks neat. but the prices of everything out there is outrageous. Alabama, on the other hand, is one of the cheapest in the state. Yes, sir. I think the states
100.
that what? Go ahead.
100, 100.
100, laughing face, smiley face. The only states that are cheaper than Alabama are Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Georgia, and that's it. Every other state is more expensive in gas than ours. But then again, we're one of the poorest states in the country. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you. Oh, wait, we didn't even address that one, did we? The Peace Corps, to answer that question, the Peace Corps has not announced that they'll be going to Ukraine yet, and that's why we haven't run a fundraiser for them. And I don't know when they'll be going over. But with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And also, shout out to Mr. Diggs for putting in a $2 super chat as well. And thank you very much for that support, Mr. Diggs. And we are moving back to our live chat questions. The next one goes to, let's see here, Timmy, who says, do you guys think Putin will be held accountable for war crimes eventually if he doesn't die prior?
I don't think he ever will be, because if he's still in charge of Russia, it just most likely won't happen, because there won't be any way to get to him without him starting a nuclear war. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
Up next, we have a question from Susan Lowell, who says, what is the effect of protracted freezing on the mines? What happens when the snow melts? And what if the snow weighs a lot?
And can you reread that one again real quick?
What is the effect of protracted freezing on the mines? What happens when the snow melts? What if the snow weighs a lot?
Snow will never weigh enough to set off a mine. If it melts, it just melts. Nothing really affects mines much. That's why mines from the Second World War can survive for decades before they explode, is because they can just handle the elements. So with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Susie Halsey, who is a mod, by the way, who says, can y'all please explain if you'll be streaming on Thanksgiving?
You're cutting out there. Can you reread that one again? And you're cutting out really badly now. It's the return of Robo Matt. We all love Robo Matt.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, so that super chat was from Susie Halsey, who is one of our mods, who said, can y'all please explain for the viewers, will y'all be streaming on Thanksgiving?
We will not be streaming on Thanksgiving. That is a definite. We will be taking Thanksgiving off because I want to take a moment to enjoy a holiday, because I didn't get to enjoy much of any holidays in between the start of this war and now, so I would like to take a moment to enjoy Thanksgiving at least. And I don't know yet, I'm going to be thinking about this, whether we're going to be taking Black Friday off or not as well. Not that I'm going to be out shopping or anything, but I feel like a lot of our viewers may be out and enjoying Black Friday as well. So it's almost a continuation of Thanksgiving. So we might be taking Thanksgiving and Black Friday off. And then coming back for Saturday and Sunday, and then going off on Monday that following week again. But I'm not entirely sure. We'll have to wait and see until we get closer to the day of. But Thanksgiving is definitely going to be off, and Black Friday is still up in the air. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. And thank you so much once again for being here, Susie, and always being around in the Discord and in the live chat as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have our decoders of the stream. CFA, WFTU, BME, Mark Hodges, and also we have the return of a channel regular who has been around for a very long time, Ashley. Hey! And they've all figured out the Morse code. They said the Morse says winter has arrived.
And it has. Y'all got it correct. And that's the sound of coins falling out of the machine. Hopefully that didn't sound that bad. But with that, y'all got it correct, and I gotta say, it's good to know that you're back, Ashley. We've been wondering where you've been, and it's great to know that you're here and deciphering Morse code messages again. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you to all of our Morse code messages once again.
All right, and up next, we have a question from Robert Gershner, who says, Matt, do you have any idea of how many viewers in Russia you have using VPNs? Well, and Robert, I have to say, if we knew the answer to that question, they wouldn't be using a very good VPN.
Well, real quick, Matthew, let me go on my second screen to my analytics, and let me go see if I can find some interesting information for our viewers. Let's see here.
Although if they're using a VPN, it's not going to show up their true country where they're from, though.
Well, actually, Interestingly enough, it shows us all the countries and where they're from and what they've watched. And we can do it over the lifetime of this whole channel.
But if it's a VPN, it's routed through a different country. It can be.
I know, but YouTube still shows us how many people have viewed from Russia itself. So let me see here. Y'all about to see a behind-the-scenes look. Wait, hang on. Let me make sure that it's not showing anything sensitive here. All right. Okay, no, it's not. All right, so y'all about to get a first-hand sensitive look at my analytics. So this is the amount of views that this channel's gotten over the course of its lifetime. 23.2 million views. It's gotten nearly 7.5 million watch hours. And the average view duration per night is 19 minutes and 26 seconds. The most of our viewers, 53% of you people, are from the United States of America. 9.3% are from Canada. 6.4% are from the United Kingdom. 5.3% of y'all are from Australia. And then I believe it's the 5th largest country of viewers here. Y'all are from Germany. And then, it goes down the list from here. So
where's Russia?
Russia's actually a little bit down on the list, but believe it or not, we've had more reviews from Russia than from Ukraine. Oh, yeah, no. Actually, that's flipped around. We've gotten 4,000 more views, nearly. Well, 3,000 more from Ukraine.
A lot of those are probably bots from Russia.
Yeah, probably a lot of Russian bots, to be honest. And they don't account for any watch time at all. Like, the Ukrainians account for a decent amount, 12,608 watch hours. The Russians only account for 5,404. And that definitely shows, also due to their view duration time being incredibly low. They were almost all bots. But that's how our analytics breaks down. And it's really interesting to see because they break it all the way down to Greece. We've gotten 21,452 views from Greece. And also, we've gotten 26,000 views from Taiwan, which is really cool. And then scrolling on through, we've gotten a lot of views from Mexico. We've gotten 84,917 views from Mexico. We've gotten 97,830 from Brazil, 100,000 from Japan, 102,000 from Switzerland, decent amount from Ireland. Not that many from France. I thought we would get more from France, but apparently not. But let's see. Let's see here. We gotten a decent amount from Sweden. We've also gotten a decent amount from New Zealand. A lot of our top view countries are from, let's see, English-speaking countries. Of course, Australia, United Kingdom, Canada, and the United States are all English-speaking, which is interesting to see. But Germany's still up there in the top 5. And Sweden is also up there as well, which is really cool to see. But anyways, with that, I hope y'all enjoyed it. A look at the behind the scenes here as to how YouTube breaks down the analytics of what countries y'all are from. And so with that, we're going to be answering 2 more questions from the live chat, and then we're going to be rounding out tonight's stream. And so with that, on to the next one.
And up next, we have another live chat from Susan Lowell, who says, is there a Russian soldier that is not a thief? Doesn't the environment force it?
I haven't really seen a Russian soldier that didn't end up being a looter or a thief, to be honest with you. I don't think the environment forces it so much as their society or their culture forces it, because we can see that they target specific items like washing machines. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that is Mandy Carroll, who says, have you seen that Turkey will no longer let uninsured tankers through the Black Sea?
I actually did not see that, and that's interesting. I don't know why they have a vested interest in making sure that tankers are insured or not, but that is still very interesting to hear that Turkey has once again done a Turkey thing. And so with that, I thank you so much for providing us with that info, and it is the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure to cover this news with all of y'all tonight, and I hope y'all have enjoyed it as much as I have. If you did, please make sure to hit the subscribe button because it helps this channel to keep growing. It helps us to reach more people. And if you hit the like button, we've gotten almost 2,800 likes right now. If y'all hit that like button, that helps this channel a lot, as well as it lets YouTube know that y'all enjoyed this content and that more people would as well. And so with that, thank you so much, everyone, once again for y'all's support, and it's helped us out immensely. It helps us to keep this channel running, and I hope y'all enjoyed us addressing y'all's super chats as well, and as many live chats as we could. We got to a decent amount of them tonight, and also some of them were incredibly interesting, and so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. Thank you all once again. Take care, have a great night, and Slava Ukraini!
this? The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Усміхнеться доля, згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу.